So, yes, chat. So, one of the things I want to bring up is the events in Berdyansk today. For people who are not aware, in fact, I will go to share this actually on the screen. Bring up the footage. It'll be a starter. Share the screen. Okay. So, people who aren't aware or are not really too abreast of what's happened, there is in fact, just before we play this clip, I will actually bring up a map so you guys haven't, just for people who aren't autistically following this to the extent that myself and certain other people are. So for people who aren't aware, within the first 4 days of the Russian invasion out of Crimea, the Russians rapidly advanced up along the coast of the Sea of Azov, and they took this particular city, Berdyansk, here. So, as you can see, Berdyansk is very close to Mariupol. What have we got? 10 miles. So you're talking about maybe, what would that be? About 20 miles, around about 30 miles between Berdyansk and Mariupol. Obviously, Berdyansk is between Mariupol, Russia proper, and Crimea. So this is a strategic area. This is the land bridge that the Russians want. This is why Mariupol is why the Ukrainians are fighting as long as possible within the city. Deny this land bridge. So yeah, Russian troops conceivably and logistics could conceivably go around Mariupol, but either way, as long as there's Ukrainians in the city, it presents a risk to any Russian logistics or supply columns that could form a land bridge that goes into southern Ukraine and supports Russian operations there. Because the other aspect, if we bring up the satellite, so for all Russian operations in southern Ukraine, for most of the war, they've been supplied through the Kerch Bridge, which is, as you can see, is very large infrastructure project that the Russians built in a couple of years after the accession of Crimea to the Russian Federation. So as you can see, there is no actual land connection between Crimea with Russia proper. So before this was built, it had to be supplied by ferries because obviously Ukraine enacted a blockade, a complete. Okay, that's good. We'll have the guy from Pridnestrovia to have on for a chat in a bit. So after I finish this bit, we'll do an interview with Sam, and then we will go on to questions and answers. But for this point, right. So as you can see, yeah, Crimea, blockaded by Ukraine after 2014, has no actual land connection to Russia proper. The only connections were ferry. So you could imagine, I believe there was 1.5 million was the population of Crimea. I think it's increased since then, but 1.5 million people. The agriculture, the military, all the industry there, it's being supported purely by ferry connections with Taganrog and Rostov and Krasnodar. That there was it wasn't very feasible. Big traffic jams started to clog up. So Putin and Russia, in the space of a couple years, built this very substantial bridge here. It is both a real. This is actually out of date because it's still showing it under construction. That's nope. Bring that back up. But either way, it is a large road bridge and a rail bridge. So that's what the Russians built. That brought various military airfield. That looks abandoned. So, as you can see, this is the only connection into the Sea of Azov. Just to quickly, so you guys sort of understand the sort of general geopolitics of the area before the war. Obviously, Mariupol, Berdyansk, these were Ukrainian cities. They have ports, so any Ukrainian shipping in the Sea of Azov became constricted by this bridge. As you can see, the bridge, ships have to go under it. So there's now a height requirement for shipping. Also, any Ukrainian ships that went through this area before the war were subject to Russian checks. In 2018, this led to an international incident whenever the Russian FSB essentially impounded Ukrainian shipping, but that's kind of by the by. for what's happening in the war, you have to sort of conceptualize. You have a major Russian offensive in southern Ukraine. Its only supply route is across this bridge. As you can see, there is two roads going in separate directions, but there's only 2 lanes on this bridge, and also you have the railway connection. Not only does this one route, of course, there is occasional ferries going, but ferries, by their definition, are not the most efficient whenever you've got train and rail and road connections. So what you have to understand is this bridge has to support the entire population of Crimea, its commercial needs, its industrial needs, its agricultural needs, the civilian population, the military operations in southern Ukraine. So I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys that, military operations require a lot of supplies, ammunition, fuel, spare parts to repair equipment, food, water for the troops. On top of that, you also have the Russian Black Sea Fleet based out of Sevastopol. So you have naval fuel, munitions, support for keeping the fleet and the garrison of Sevastopol going alongside the civilian population here. As the Russians expand their control in southern Ukraine, what are they picking up? They're picking up cities like Kherson. They're picking up, it's a bit of an interesting story around Skvdorsk, but I'll not go into the particulars of that. But, you got places like that, Melitopol, Tomak, Erindogar. Civilian populations here need to be fed. So as long as Mariupol still holds out, the Russians can't really bring in this land bridge supply across there. So that's more pressure put on this one connection point. So you have to imagine, especially here, I would maybe 5-6 million civilian population. God knows how many military population have to be supported by support that will largely mostly come across this single bridge. And then on top of that is here you've got, where is the actual border? So this is the border here. So here you've got the border crossings. Got one road there, second crossing there. Is that it? Is that actually it? They only have 2? Oh no, 3. So you have 3. Yeah, is that a road? They use that as well. Yeah, I guess 4, though that doesn't look like a real main road, does it? But you have 4 roads, only 4 roads that go from Crimea into Ukraine. So 1 bridge and 4 roads, and let's be honest, this road doesn't really look like a main road. Let's have a look. What's the? Yeah, so these aren't like highways or freeways. These are, yeah, that's a 2-lane road. So these aren't even like major highways. These are. So the point I'm trying to build up here is that Russian logistics in southern Ukraine is quite constricted. Yeah, that as well. That's just a 2-lane road. So these aren't highways. So you've got all this Russian supply for military and civilian populations being funneled into this one bridge, then being funneled across 3/4 fairly small roads that go from Crimea into Ukraine and then to feed operations in Ukraine, southern Ukraine, and the civilian population. So until Mariupol squared away, the Russians really can't exploit this land. I guess they could to a degree, but the threat from Mariupol kind of throws the spanner into the works. So until Mariupol is squared away, this is the main axis of supply. So now we come to Berdyansk. The Russians took Berdyansk on day 4 of the invasion without a fight. There was no fighting in the area. The Russians rocked up into the city, took it completely just intact, captured the local Ukrainian naval base. Let's have a look. Is that actually distinct from the port itself, or? Well, either way, there was a sizable Ukrainian naval facility into the city. They didn't seem to put up a fight. No, that's a beach. They didn't seem to put up a fight. The Russians took it completely just unharmed, the entire city intact. There were some small rallies over the past few days, but either way, past couple days. So here's the port itself. As you can see, this isn't a major port. It's got one large pier, and here you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'd say these are medium sized. container ships. So, a respectable sized port for the city of its size, but you cannot. It's not the Los Angeles terminal, is it? It's not a massive port. It's respectable, but it's something. So, a couple days ago, this footage comes out. RT, obviously, Russian naval ship. As you can see, just for you to verify, these are the cranes. That's that big fuel tank there. And then the cranes. So this is of this port of Berdyansk port. So as you can see, Russian naval ship, Russian naval standard. They're offloading. That's a BTR 92. Essentially, the Russians have started to use this port to bring material, I've heard potentially men, to bring supplies into Ukraine. So this relieves the pressure on that here. And until this properly opens up, Berdyansk was becoming a very major logistics hub to relieve the chronic logistics problems that the Russians have in Ukraine. So whenever I've done my talks about the Russian sieges, pardon me, the methodology behind the Russian siege, the Russian shelling that they're doing in cities such as Kharkov, Chernigov, Sumy. The way I'm saying that they're encouraging the civilian population to leave. And then whenever I was talking about how it was very interesting to note that the Russians were allowing parts of the population of Erendogar to freely go to Zaporozhye and back to Ukrainian held territory. There's a number of reasons for that, but I think the big pressing issue is, one, obviously less population, less potential future partisans or rallies or opposition to Russian troops. But the big thing is less civilian population here, less mouths to feed for the Russian logistics train that has to travel through here, potentially here. So Berdyansk was looking to be a very major aspect for the Russian logistics operation in southern Ukraine. So, see, that was the footage that came out. So there, I've made points about this. One of the big themes I've been banging on for a while is logistics, because it is crucial to the Russians. They are having problems with it. So, made some notes about Berdyansk and how it's important. But this happened today. Berdyansk port was hit by what appears to be sizable Ukrainian missile strike. So these are scenes. This is one of the Russian support ships trying to get out of the port. I'll play some footage actually of the port itself. But so the allegation is potentially maybe there might have been an accident at the port. Someone might have pressed the wrong button, something might have failed, the ammo on the ship might have detonated. That's one possibility. What's more likely, however, and which would actually be quite incredible, I don't know how accurate the Toka missile could be, but the suggestion is that somewhere in Ukrainian held territory, so somewhere, see, Volnovka, so if you can sort of conceptualize it in your mind, the front line sort of goes from around here along this road and then up around here into the Donbass. So what is that? That's going to be, that scale, maybe around 20 to 30 miles, 40 miles. So 40 miles away is the front line from Berdyansk. So it is a bit of a trek. So the Toka missile has a range of a few hundred miles. The Ukrainians have used the Toka to strike a target in Rostov, also in Milorovo. Whereabouts is Milorovo? Essentially, the Ukrainians have used it to hit targets in Russia proper. They hit Milorovo airbase. Another one hit a Russian airbase near between Tagnarog and Rostov as well in the first couple of weeks. They also tried to deploy it against Belgorod up here, and they've deployed it regularly at targets in Melitopol. They used it a few last week, quite horrifically, from the footage against civilians in Donetsk. I don't know why I'm scrolling over Mariupol, but they've used it. The Ukrainians used the Toka. I guess it is hypothetical the Russians themselves could use the Toka missile system, but generally the Russians have phased out the system, so it's mostly an exclusive Ukrainian weapon. So the Ukrainians have used it as obviously Ukrainian aircraft is, if there's many of them left, they don't really have a very high likelihood to be able to hit targets in Russia. let alone these frontline targets within the battlefield. So that's why the Ukrainians use the Toka. That's their way of strategic bombing, of hitting targets behind the lines back in Russia or behind lines in Russian occupied Ukrainian territory. So it appears that the Ukrainians might have gotten very, very lucky or very, very skillfully used a Toka to directly hit one of these ships. So we will look at this footage here. We'll outline what is happening. Let me just have a quick. I hope this footage is coming through to a decent quality that isn't all funny and fuzzy so you guys can follow it. So here you go. This is the scene of the port this morning. So, yep. This ship here looks to be completely destroyed. As you can see, that's the bow of the ship. It's facing up, so it has sunk. There was some suggestion that the crew might have scuttled the ship to put. So as you can see, the ship's on fire. Let it play it for a bit. So as you can see, there's bits flying off of it. There's ammunition cooking off on that ship. So there's shells and ammunition detonating. You see splashes there. So there's bits exploding on the ship and off. So there is some suggestion that the crew might have scuttled the ship once they realized. So essentially what the idea is, maybe a Toka missile came down and hit the ship, and it's very badly damaged the ship. It's caused an ammunition fire on the ship. So that in itself could have what sunk the ship. This could be the face-saving explanation that some of the Russians are saying, but what the Russians are saying is that the crew of the ship, seeing that the ammunition was on fire, decided to open up the sea cocks. For people who don't know, there's like little bits, there's little locks in the ship that you open up, which allow water into the ship to give it ballast or to scuttle the ship. That's what the Russians are saying, that the crew scuttled the ship to put more of the ammunition that's in the ship underwater, so it's not going to detonate, like you can see here that the ammunition above water is. So that's what the Russians are saying. So that ship's out of action. That would take a significant amount of time to refloat, and if it's without having a good look at it, that ship is probably just scrap. It'll probably never sail again if it's even worth repairing. As you can see, there's a tug. No, not that a tugboat. Yeah, that's a ship quickly heading away from port. As you can see, this Russian naval ship, it is rapidly putting out to sea to get away from this, because like I say, there's bits exploding off this. There's ammunition cooking off. You can see splashes in the water there as bits physically explode, and that's going to be, that's at least a good couple 100 meters. So that gives you an idea. That was sizable, whatever that was, to give that splash. So that gives you an idea of the power of the explosions on this vessel to throw sizable objects hundreds of meters away. So that's why this ship in particular, is trying to get out of port to avoid the explosion and damage from this, and also the potentiality that more Ukrainian Toka missiles could come in and hit the port. Because if the Ukrainians were actually aiming for that, that is very good. That's, again, I don't know how accurate Toka missiles could be. From what I've seen, is mostly the Ukrainians just sort of launch them in a general direction, and if they hit something, it's more luck than it is design. So this could have been pure luck that this missile directly hit that ship, or else if it was an accurate strike, that was very, very, very good accuracy. So better safe than sorry. Put the ships to the sea in case there's more missiles on the way. So I'll then go back to the missiles in a bit, but just to give you an idea, as you can see, there's some smoke. So if you just missed that, more splashes around the ship. So almost certainly that ship's being hit by stuff. There's some smoke coming off of it, so this ship has sustained damage as well. And then there is a second ship that I believe comes out in a couple of minutes as well. I think that might be it, just emerging from smoke there. There's another ship that appears to have been, yep, there it is there. So that is the second ship coming out, and as you can see, that it has fire on deck. There's quite a significant fire on its deck. It's putting out a lot of smoke. It is taking significant damage as well. So one ship completely lost, completely combat ineffectual, if it will ever float again. Another ship quite heavily damaged, and this one has sustained some kind of damage. So this is not ideal for Russia. This is quite bad for Russia, because not only have you essentially two ships out of action and one damaged. The bigger aspect that's going to cause concern for the Russians, this port is now basically going to be out of action for a while. One of the potential berthing spots on the port is completely taken up by the wreck here. The damage that will have done almost certainly to these cranes, to the surrounding facilities on the port. I'm not a guy, I don't work in a port, so maybe if there's like a guy who works in a port or someone who works in cranes and stuff could correct me on this. I'm imagining that it's going to take a bit of time for the Russians to clear up this damage and bring this port back into action again. Play out the rest of this. So as you can see, that's still exploding. So quite a significant loss for Russia. And going back to this, like I say, the thing to bear in mind, so that footage will have come from somewhere in this direction. So this video, I believe we're looking out from this direction, I would imagine. Quick look, just where's that? Yeah, so that point there is there. So this footage is coming from somewhere around there. So the ship's set out to sea that way. So the wider aspect is this port's now out of action, and the Russians were putting out. I guess they could immediately restart this side of the port, but either way, this is going to be at least a day. This port is out of action, and the Russians is these two ships, because these aren't fighting ships. These are logistic ships. These are carrying supplies. So these would have been full of supplies. This is why this one's cooking off. It is full of ammunition. This is ammunition that's not going to reach the front. It's ammunition that's not going to reach the Russian troops. So there's going to be problems here. So now that that port is out of action, the stress on this bridge, on these crossings across from Crimea, grows. This is going to constrain the options for Russia, at least for the next week or so, until Mariupol is sorted, on what the Russians are able to achieve and do in southern Ukraine. Now, this feeds into the wider picture, because what I've been speaking of the past the past week is Russia is playing against time. Russian options until at least May, late April, May, are constrained. What are they constrained by? And this is something I keep this. Yeah. So let's bring up the trusty. Isn't looking for a very particular weather map that shows everything I need. Yes, here we go. So like I say, logistics issue for Russia, but also for the Ukrainians. They're playing for time. Ukraine needs time. This potentially gives them more time. So that port's out of action. That potentially slows down everything Russia can do here, because it's not going to get as much fuel. It's not going to get as much ammunition. Chronic logistics problem that's plagued the Russian forces in the south. Don't forget, the Russian forces in the south are the most effective ones. They're the ones who've gone the furthest, done the most, achieved the most. So the one thing that's mainly holding them back is their logistics issue. So whereas Berdyansk bringing stuff in there might have relieved that and allowed these troops to act with a bit more efficiency, get a bit more mobility behind them. Now that Berdyansk is out for the next few days at least, we're back to this constricted logistics point here. So this is going to slow down, restrict the options that the Russians in the south of Ukraine have for the foreseeable future, which could buy more time for Ukraine. And time is something that the Russians don't really have. So this is the weather map today. A bit of rain in northern Ukraine, just coming over from Belarus. But remember what I've been saying. I've been emphasizing mud. Raputsia. It's mud season. The Russians have been lucky so far. The spring rains haven't yet come. But how does this work? See, the spring rains are starting to come, so this isn't too much, but as we go through time, let's just play it. Is this just going to play today, or is this going to play the next couple of days? So yeah, this will play through the days. You can see spring rains are starting to arrive across Ukraine from, what's the date there? 27th. So there's a bit there. So from Saturday, the rains start to arrive. And yeah, it's not so much at the moment, but don't forget it is mostly just above zero in Ukraine. So this isn't going to dry out. Pardon me, the Russians hit a bit of luck over the past couple of weeks because there wasn't much rain and snow across Ukraine, so the ground started to dry out to a bit. This week it continued to dry out. The Russians were getting a bit more mobile in certain places, especially in areas such as Chernigov and in the Kharkov area. They were getting a bit more mobile, but this rain is very much going to dampen that, to, if you excuse the pun, because this isn't going to dry out. So play it on for a bit. So the 28th. Yeah, so it's not extensive rains, but essentially the point I'm trying to make is that the weather is starting to change against the Russians' favor. Is this rain here, this bank of rain here, this is going to screw up all Russian logistics, all of this. So this is from the 31st. The 31st is next Thursday. So maybe there's still a bit of time for the Russians to have a bit of maneuver, but if this weather map is accurate, this comes next Thursday, this is going to be basically the start of mud season. Is the ground is just going to turn sodden. Tanks, vehicles are going to flounder in the mud. The Russians are going to be constricted to just operating on tarmac roads. So that's the time aspect. Once that happens, the Russians aren't really going to be able to restart their significant advances. They're not going to get momentum into their offensives anymore. So that's why the Ukrainians are playing for time. That's why striking Berdyansk in many ways is quite a big achievement for the Ukrainians, that they were able to achieve what they've done there. So that's the issue I want you guys to sort of take away from it. This is the little thing that I'm going to bring out, sort of show you guys context of it, how it impacts things wider, how it feeds into the wider aspect of the war, of the conflict. So now the other thing is someone has screwed up quite bad in the Russian army around here, very bad. And let's be honest, there has been a lot of incompetency in the Russian army, but this one is. If we just have a look, let's have a look at Taka in the channel. Got many posts about the Takas. See, have we gotten some examples? Play Gore. So just for an idea, this is footage of how this system is deployed. So I believe the launch vehicle is called a Scarab. I believe this is known as a Scarab. This is the Taka missile itself. Just so you guys have an idea of whenever I say these names, what I'm actually talking about. Yeah, you can conceptualize this in your head. So it's a short-range ballistic missile. So just so you have an idea of what we're talking about, and like I say, the Ukrainians have been using them quite a lot, but the Russians have usually been quite adept at shooting them down. So this is in Melitopol. So Melitopol, that's how I pronounce it. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, but as you can see, this is Melitopol here. This has been under Russian occupation for weeks now. So the Russians are able to shoot them down once they're deployed there. And the Russians have shot down several Takas that have attempted to get into Donetsk. They failed once and it killed a lot of civilians, but the Russians have been... The Taka isn't a modern missile system, it's quite old. And as I keep trying to emphasize, is the Russians can shoot them down. So if this was a Taka missile strike, why wasn't Russian air defense around Berdyansk? Because they have, in fact, I am almost certain that... Let me just have a... So I'm almost certain that the Ukrainians have fired Takas at Berdyansk before. and that the Russians have shot them down. I know, obviously, you can't get lucky. The Russians have to be adept. You have to shoot them down all the time. The Ukrainians just have to get lucky one of the times, but the Ukrainians really got lucky this time. So I'll just try and find an example because I'm almost certain. Quick look, see if it is. So, yeah, that's another thing is the Ukrainians clearly know how important this port is because whenever they had the ability from Mariupol on the 28th of February, so more than 3 weeks ago, is they actually used artillery in Mariupol to shell the port. So there you can see the shells and everything coming in. That's the port there. So the Ukrainians shelled it from Mariupol whenever they had the ability to do so. That ability has obviously been lost, but Ukrainians are quite aware of how important the port is. And like I say, I'm just looking because I'm almost certain that the Ukrainians have fired Takas at Berdyansk before, and the Russians shot it down. But either way, in fact, here we go. Yeah, so here, Ukrainians have fired a Taka at the port before. This one actually looks like it came down on the port, but the Russians were able to shoot it down. So the Russians have the ability to shoot these things down, and they have shot these things down once they've been fired at Berdyansk. So quite how they allowed this one to get through in such a spectacular fashion, if indeed it was a Taka missile, is someone somewhere is quite badly screwed up, very badly screwed up in the Russian air defense network, and that screw up now has essentially strategic implications on the operations in all southern Ukraine. I'm not saying this is going to lose the Russians the war. No, the Russians are. I'm still projecting that they will win the war, but this will slow it down quite significantly. This could cause problems for the Russians in the long run. Could prolong their troubles because the other aspect, and I'll moving off of Berdyansk, I'll move on to what the Ukrainians have been up to. I haven't seen too much evidence of it so far, but the Ukrainians retook, I believe it was this town, in the past week, and there's been some suggestions that the Ukrainians are actually launching a bit of a counterattack out of Nikolaev towards Kherson. So, quite how effective it will be, we'll have to see how it turns out. But Russian forces have been advancing up here, and they're approaching Kivarog. So their supply lines are stretched as they support this offensive up here. If they don't have enough troops, if they're not well supplied, if they're not able to properly contain any potential Ukrainian push out of Nikolaev, Ukrainians could hypothetically push here right into the logistics line along this road, along these roads going up to support Russian operations further up country, and really significantly dent, hypothetically, encircle to a degree, but that would be an encirclement I don't think that the Ukrainians would be able to sustain. But either way, with the lack of supply, the stretch and logistics train on ammunition supply, it opens up the opportunity for the Ukrainians to do a bit more damage, maybe to take back a bit of ground around the Kherson Nikolaev area. So then we'll then go to other suggestions of where the Ukrainians are doing some things. So in recent days, I think it's pretty much been confirmed by the Russians that the Ukrainians were able to reclaim Makarov, north of Kiev. So just so you're aware of, there's Bucha, Irpin. This is where the big battle has been going on for weeks now. The limit of the Russian western advance was here at Makarov. If anyone remembers that quite disturbing video of the BMP-2 that fired on the pensioner's car and killed both of them, that happened in this area. So it appears that the Ukrainians have retaken this town and pushed the Russians back. There's some suggestion that the Ukrainians are making a bit of ground in Irpin. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. And also the Ukrainians, if I can find it, retook this town of Moshun. Ukrainians have taken this, and there's been some suggestions that the Ukrainians have then advanced from there and essentially entered Gostomel town, the village of Gostomel itself. This would be fairly concerning for the Russians because the main Russian supply, if this has indeed happened, I'm not saying it has, but the Ukrainians they're definitely in this town. They've definitely retaken back Makarov. So if this is indeed true, I don't know what the Russians are doing in the north of Kiev. It would it would be very concerning for them, especially if they're entering Gostomel itself, because let's have a look at the Russian supply column. So the main Russian advance came out of the Chernobyl area. So it came through, where is the road if it shows up? I don't know if the road will show up because, yes, technically it's abandoned. But either way, the main Russian supply column goes through Pripyat and Chernobyl itself. If anything, I think it's this road here because the footage you see of it passing Chernobyl, you can actually see the power plant itself. So I am assuming that it must be this road here that goes via power plant. And there's another road there. So either way, it's yeah, this looks to be the only real road that goes through the area. That's not a road, that's a path. So yes, so this road here, it goes up into Chernobyl, up through Pripyat, and then further up into Belarus. Again, as I was saying about the roads in Crimea, this is not a big road. This is not a highway. This is not a freeway. This is what looks to be at most a 2-lane road. So this is what all the Russian supply rests on. This road that comes all the way down here, pushes down here. So where are we looking? Yeah, so this looks to be one of the more beefier roads along this road. It will spread out and percolate through various smaller roads along here, but essentially this looks to be... There's a dog barking in the background. You guys can hear it or not. But this yellow road appears to be one of the more major roads in the area. And as you can see, it comes down here into Gostomel village, goes up into the airport. The airport almost certainly is being used as sort of a forward operation base, logistics hub for Russian operations in the north of Kiev. So if the Ukrainians have indeed retaken this town, you can see it's a very short walk from there to this road. It's fairly open ground as well. So Russian troops, reinforcements coming down this road, they're at risk from attack from this village. So why the Russians didn't seem to put up a big fight or occupy this village, I don't know. Maybe they're coming down other roads. Maybe they're percolating along these other roads. But either way, the point I'm trying to get at is the wider aspect and the wider thing to look at is in Crimea here, they might have other roads, but these aren't big roads. There's not a lot of stuff that you can put down this road at once. So if this road is out of action and you're relegated to this road or a couple other roads, that's more stuff you have to put down this road at once. That's ammunition, that's food, that's fuel, that's well, ammunition, same thing, but that's reinforcements. That's also quote unquote humanitarian aid because you have to feed the local civilian population as well to keep them placated. So that's the other aspect to look at in the north of Kiev. In the northern Kiev sector, especially if the Ukrainians have now pushed into Gostomel. You can see this road goes down. It feeds into Bucha. This is where the big battle is taking place between Bucha and Irpin. So that's the famous... Is that the bridge there? Bridge. This is bogged out, but yeah, either way, this is the area where the big battles are taking place. So the troops here need to be supplied from here. Could potentially go down there, could potentially use this road, but either way, if the larger amount of roads, the more fuel, the more logistics can get through. As the Ukrainians, as it is claimed, as the Ukrainians are able to take more of these roads out of action, the more constrained and the more stressed the Russian logistic situation comes, the less effective its troops can be, because if they're not getting rearmed, they're not getting properly fed, the less effective they'll be. So this is why in the first couple weeks, the Western press was all talking about this 40-kilometer long Russian column. Yeah, the reason why it was 40 kilometers long is because it was all along this one road. And as I keep trying to labor the point, this isn't a big road. So if you're putting tanks, you're putting hundreds of tanks, thousands of trucks, thousands of troops down this one road, traffic jams are really going to, if a truck breaks down round about here or there's an accident here, that backs up the column all the way back to the Belarusian border. That screws up the logistics, the reinforcements, that puts everything on hold. So like I say, logistics is the biggest problem that the Russians have during the war. I think if the Russians were able to sort out their logistics problem, I wouldn't. I think it'd be too much to say they could have won the war by now, but they would be doing a lot better. They'll be further ahead of where they are. Some of these cities could very well have been taken. The encirclement of Kiev to the west could very well have been achieved. It's the biggest thing that's holding back the Russians are themselves, and most of all, a lot of it's the incompetence of its commanders, but the big thing is logistics. Just the logistics things are slowing down the advance. So that's the kind of overarching geostrategic narrative I kind of want to put across to you guys. But also, just to also point out, the Russians as well are said to be pushing in and taking how would I pronounce that? Slavtush. I'm just going to say Slavtush. So very near the Belarusian border. Kind of surprised the Russians haven't already taken it, but this is part of the salient in the Russian lines of the wider defensive pocket of Chernigov. So the Russians are said to be storming this town within the past couple hours. Could still be going on. Could have fallen for all I know. So that's one of the big plays the Russians are doing today. Take these small towns around Chernigov. Chernigov, for all intents and purposes, is basically besieged. I believe the Ukrainians still hold territory around here. But this road, there's Russian troops on this road further down it. So there's a river here. Have a look. Yeah, so this is the only real crossing on that bridge. So this territory here, from some of the maps I've looked at, is still in Ukrainian hands, but roundabout here there's Russian troops here. So this road is effectively ineffectual. They can't use this road. So for all intents and purposes, Chernigov is besieged. So the Russians are able to start nipping away these towns. They'll slowly constrict the knot around the city. Hypothetically, I guess if the Ukrainians could bring up some pontoons or boats or something, they could try and get munitions and food and stuff into the city. But this ground, you can see, if there is roads, that's not a paved road. These are dirt tracks. So this is where if the Ukrainians are minded to do this, this is where the Rains will play against Ukraine, trying to put across the logistics train across this terrain to put up a pontoon bridge or try and boat across stuff. Is going to flounder in the mud. Be very easy targets for any Russian aircraft, for Russian artillery if they become aware of it. So yeah, Chernigov is completely cut off as far as I can see. And then finally, for the guy who has asked me a few times, let's go over to Izyum. The other big story is this town here, Izyum. Earlier today, the Russian MOD gave out a briefing saying they had taken the town. That a couple hours later, that was disputed by the local Ukrainian administration, saying the Russians had not taken the town. Then some footage came out of the Russian artillery shelling the town. So if the Russians are shelling the town, that tells me the Russians haven't taken the town and that potentially fighting is still ongoing. So have a look at this river. So this is quite a significant river. 1, 2, 3 bridges. Yeah, so there's 3 bridges that cross the Siversky Donets River. I'll just call it Donets. So the Donets River. There's 3 bridges across this river in Izyum. Very strategic for the Russians. If the Russians are able to take it, the Ukrainians aren't able to destroy the bridges. The Russians take the bridges intact. That opens up some very big plays that the Russians are able to play to enact on. Because this then opens up this battle group here. the Russian battle group going into Ukraine here, if they can take that town, they can now push into the rear of the Ukrainian forces in the Donbass. So the Ukrainian troops here, as I think I said this in the previous stream, they're heavily engaged in fighting. They can't really retreat, because if they try and break into a retreat, the Donetsk militia especially will just immediately pounce on them and destroy any attempt to retreat. So they're attempting a fighting retreat, which is slow and laborious. They're trying to give up ground, as costly as it is. But if the Russians are able to take Izium, they're able to push straight into the back of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. This will mean that the Ukrainians would have to take troops off of the front line, fighting against the Lugansk and Donetsk militias to face off this Russian troop. That will give opportunities for the Donetsk and Lugansk troop forces to maybe break through and essentially rout and just affect the complete breakup of the Ukrainian battle group armed forces in the Donbass area. As alongside this, although they haven't seemed to have been able to have enacted, maybe the strike at Berdyansk could put paid to it. But once Mariupol is tied up, and also out of Melitopol, out of this sort of area, the Russians could very well enact a new offensive. They could push up here into the rear of the Donbass and encircle and destroy the Ukrainian troops in the Donbass. So the Russians are taking a long time to do it. This is something I thought that they would have been able to have enacted within the first week. But the strategic position for the Ukrainian troops in the Donbass still remains very, very bleak. It's just really the Russians themselves that seem to be holding back the eventual encirclement and destruction of the Ukrainian army in the Donbass. And if the Russians, when and if the Russians are able to achieve that, that would be the biggest victory by far that the Russians are able to will have made during the war, because that is a lot of men, that is a lot of equipment. Some of the best Ukrainian troops as well would be destroyed in that action. That would free up so many troops, so much equipment. That would allow the Donetsk and Luhansk troops to push out into wider Ukraine, free up so many Russian troops around here. It just opens up so many opportunities for the Russians further action further down the road. But it just seems that the Russians, almost certainly logistics problems, but also to a degree maybe incompetence on the battalion and divisional level of their commanders. They're just don't seem to have been able to have enacted that so far. Like I say, I was expecting it. In fact, let's have a look. If I'm not mistaken, one of the very first posts I might have made in the channel during the first week might have been talking just about that. Quick look. Something, I'm pretty sure I made a map somewhere. Wow, here we go. Here's a post from the 27th of... I actually talk about the Donbass in this post. Well, either way, it's interesting to go back and see what I posted very early in the invasion and how I thought things were developing, what the Russians were doing, and then looking at how it's panned out. So, but I'm pretty sure I did make... Where have I mentioned the Donbass in this post? Yeah, so here. So this is a post I made on the 27th of February, so 3 days into the war, almost a month ago now. Ultimately, the biggest problem besides Kiev for Ukraine is the southeast. Southeast of Ukraine is the Donbass. The Russian VDVZ force, these are the troops that come out of Crimea, has advanced as fast as it can, uncontested across most of Kherson, into the rear of the Ukrainian army in the Donbass. Yesterday, that front started to collapse as the DNR broke through in the east, and Mariupol is close to encirclement. This blows open the entire southeast and undermines any long-term defense of Kharkov, as it could be threatened from the south in the near future, hence why the chatter about the Ukrainian army pulling out of the area would make sense. All Ukrainian army units in the east of the Dnieper are close to being encircled in the opening days. So this is what I said on the third day of the invasion, whenever it looked like the Russians still at that point had their shit together and were able to achieve this. We're a month down the road. Mariupol still hasn't fully fallen, though it will fall within the next week or so, I would expect. But namely, like I say, this post I was making here, and a lot of other people were saying it, this isn't just my conjecture. I know some of you guys have it in my heads that I only talk about, Russia's bad and stuff. No, I'm talking about what I see and what I would think would be reasonable expectations that it could achieve. So I would have felt especially this would have been a fairly reasonable expectation for it to achieve within the first to second week. We're a month later and they still haven't been able to achieve this. I do expect them to achieve it at some point, but if the Russians were able to achieve this within the first or the second week, this would have been a massive knockout blow. This really would have been a very big knockout blow to Ukraine. I don't think they would have been able to recover from it. So I know a lot of you guys very strongly dispute the idea that Russia could have won the war within 5 days or something. No, I still maintain that if the Russians had their shit together, the fighting wouldn't have stopped within 5 days. But Russia, well, maybe not specifically 5 days, but within potentially the first week, is the Russians very well could have, for all intents and purposes, have won the war. The next couple weeks or so would have been them just effectively mopping up disorganized and confused Ukrainian resistance. So, like I say, I know a lot of people disagree with me on this. That's okay. You're welcome to do it. You can ask me questions about it, and I've articulated my views on it. But so my assessment of what the Russian opening move was, this big landing they did on Gostomel doesn't make sense unless they were making a big play. You don't send in 60 helicopters with some of your most elite VDV troops, take this airfield, this very large airfield, because don't forget, this is where the Antonov Mirror flew, so this is one of the largest runways that you can have. If you look, in fact, actually, just to bring up this point, and the Ukrainians were very well of it as well at the time, so let's just on this point, just to sort of give you. So for those who aren't aware, in the hours just before the invasion, the Americans told the Ukrainians that the Russians were coming, because the Americans have quite deeply penetrated Russian command with their intelligence. So the Ukrainians, I originally thought in the hours before that the Russians were just going to do a small invasion around Kharkov, because this is where the no-fly zones were enacted by Russia and Ukraine. And also, very interestingly, where is the airport? Here's the airport. News came out. The Ukrainians essentially got trucks. The Ukrainian army basically pulled civilians out of their trucks as they drove past the airport, got in the trucks and drove them onto the runway and just blocked the runway to stop Russian planes landing on it. Obviously the Americans didn't know exactly where, and they assumed it would have been Kharkov, but they told the Ukrainians the Russians are going to try and land on one of the airports. So the Ukrainians then said, okay, we've got to block the airport where the Russians more likely to do it, Kharkov. So they blocked the airport with heavy machinery, with trucks to stop fixed-wing aircraft landing on it. So the Americans had penetrated the Russian command system enough to know that the Russians were going to target an airport. They just didn't seem to know the exact airport. So the exact airport where the landing happened was Gostomel, this airport. And the Ukrainians, once they sort of got wise, they did try and block this runway. And if I can find some footage of it, where is the very good... No, that's finding a Moshon. Where is the one of the KA-52? Because it had it quite good. Because there is KA-50. Is this it? I think this might be it. Sure. Yeah, so here you can see, here's the runway. You can see there's some stuff on the runway there. Oh, it just cut out there. So you can sort of make out it immediately cuts out, but you can see they've put a vehicle on this runway here. Granted, this isn't like, that's more of a taxi runway as opposed to main one, but there is a couple of stuff. There's something there. There's a couple of stuff on this main runway. But as you can see, it's largely clear. So the Ukrainians didn't have the time and they didn't expect this airport to be where the landing took place. In fact, I believe there is Grinder of Gostomel. What's that in response to? But is this it? There was one very good bit of Russian footage that showed. Yeah, this is it. So here you can see the airport here. So for people, if you look at just to have an idea of the satellite, this is where the Mira, the largest plane in the world, was kept. And in this footage, just so you can sort of orientate yourself whenever you look at this footage, that's the Mira over there. This is the runway. This is footage of the landing itself. That's not the footage I'm looking for. There is one very good bit of. I think this is it. Yeah, this is it. So this is a view from the cockpit. So there's the big hangar. That's where the Mira was over there. So over there's the. But as you can see, if we just go back and I take your attention away from the hangars, you can see there's stuff on the runway. So, but they've not been able to properly bugger up the runway. So the Ukrainians knew there was something coming. So they just got what they could and got them out into the Gostomel runway whenever they could. But the runway was still operational. The vehicles on the runway don't look destroyed. They've not been burned. So conceivably, the Russians could have just gotten into them. So there you can see, what's that? That's a fuel truck of some kind. Like I say, the reason why I'm kind of giving this sort of in-depth lecture type thing is I'm trying to explain to you my reason for why I think like this. So this isn't just me just coming out with, oh, Russia bad takes. This is me. I'm giving you my reason for thinking like this. So the Russians landed here, and this is one of the biggest moves they did on the first day. They took over this airport pretty much intact, as you could see in the footage. Some small stuff, some occasional trucks on the runway, but they didn't burn the trucks. They didn't have the time to properly put the runway out of action. So why did the Russians land on this runway? My interpretation of it is that the Russians took this runway because they were planning to then fly aircraft onto it, namely the Aleutians. So let me bring up a picture of this aircraft just so you have an idea of what I am talking about in this regards. Oh, screw it. I'll just go for the Wikipedia article. So again, biggest plane in the world flies off this runway. So pretty much anything smaller than the biggest plane in the world will be able to use this runway. And if it's small enough, you could have potentially a number of planes could land on this runway at once if they taxi properly. So what I expect, so the helicopter assault comes in, the VDV lands, they take over the airport secure. The Ukrainians were able to put a counterattack, a very fierce counterattack, quick enough that put the shelling, the scenes of the fighting, I could bring up footage and show you, but essentially it was very heavy fighting. The Russian plan fell apart there, and they weren't able to enact it. But let's go with the hypothesis that I'm going with, that I think the Russians were trying to do. So the Russians take this airport. Ukraine is still confused. It's completely bewildered by what it is. It isn't able to mount. Hypothetically, it isn't able to mount a effective counterattack in time. VDV takes the airport. What comes down out of Belarus? Loads of these aircraft. These are Russian transport aircraft. The Russians are very adept at putting tanks and stuff in it. Just to give you an idea, these are specifically designed for combat operation. Well, maybe not combat, but military operations. So as you can see, this is it landing essentially on a dirt runway. So So potentially this could have been the very scene that the Russians were anticipating in Gostomel. Just imagine it's the runway, but these jets landing on the runway with maybe with Heinz Ka-52s providing security, flying alongside it as escort to prevent any Ukrainian attempt to destroy the aircraft on the runway. So let's have a look. Do we have any pictures of BMDs in them by any chance? Yeah, so as you can see, you can fit, well, this is ironically a Ukrainian variant of it, but you can fit BMDs in it, infantry fighting vehicles, pirate VDV companies and platoons. So again, this is my hypothesis of it. I was expecting the Russians had an air bridge of these waiting to come in, land on the airport for these vehicles to rapidly disembark, essentially just, and then race hell for leather as fast as they could into Kiev, use the confusion of the invasion, the confusion of what, because if you remember those first couple of days, there were civilians driving into battle, literally into the middle of active battlefields because they didn't know what was going on. So there's a lot of confusion in those days. So if on the first day the Russians were able to take this airfield, disembark mechanized infantry, that infantry powers down into Kiev. I'm not saying they could have killed or captured the president. I'm not saying they could have killed or captured. They could have captured the entire city, but they could very much have caused a lot of confusion. If they caught the Ukrainian command unaware, they captured some of them, killed some of them. That would have completely demoralized, crippled the entire country. Just caused so much confusion, so much disorientation in the Ukrainian army across the battlefield. It could very well have made, it could have maybe not won Russia the war there and then, but it would have helped a lot if everything went to what the Russians planned it to be. And then I know a lot of people, they push back on it and sit there and say, well, wouldn't this have been a suicide mission? No, because within 24 hours of the Russians taking this airfield, yeah, the Ukrainians put up a big counterattack onto it, and the air bridge plan fell apart. But the Ukrainians say they largely retook the airbase. I'm not too sure if I believe that. But essentially, the Russians were able to hold on to the airfield in some form or another. The VDV held on for 24 hours of constant artillery, constant Ukrainian helicopter attack, massive counterattack the Ukrainians threw at the airfield. So why this wouldn't have been a suicide mission if this was indeed the plan to steam as fast as they could into Kiev. Within 24 hours of them landing on the airfield, column that came down from Chernobyl, so the Ukrainians were heavily engaged in fighting on the airfield. The Russian advance out of Chernobyl just came down into Gostomel town and hit the Ukrainian army in the flank and essentially shattered it. Completely decimated the Ukrainian military in the north of Kiev. And then I could go on to how the Russians then fumbled the ball and lost the massive advantage they had. But either way, I'm not focusing on that. I'm just focusing on this opening play of how the Russians could very well have, for all intents and purposes, won the war in the first week. So there, the Gostomel Kiev operation, had that worked, that would have demoralized, thrown so much confusion around the country. Well, who's in charge? The Russians are in Kiev. Has Kiev fallen? Who are we taking orders from? We're not getting orders from Kiev anymore. What do the Ukrainian army units in the east of the country, how do they organize themselves if they're not in touch with Kiev? If the Russians were able to enact this encirclement in the Donbass in the first week and essentially just removed the bulk of the Ukrainian army out of play, that plus Kiev, essentially, I think that the Russians would have, for all intents and purposes, won the war there and then. Yeah, the war would have gone on longer than that, but essentially the next 2 or 3 weeks of the war is the Russians would have essentially largely freely have been able to advance across the rest of the country and just mopped up disorganized Ukrainian army units where they came across it, and where they, pardon me, I've got a bit of a hiccup. Like I say, I'm still a bit ill at the moment. Apologies. But where the Ukrainians were able to organize effective resistance is then the Russians would have just kettled them, done the castle I think castle's the German term for an encirclement, but what the Russians have ended up doing in Sumny and Chernigov once they reached resistance that was of any significant amount as they advanced across this demoralized, disintegrating nation. If they were able to pull off these two operations in the first week, yeah, they would have just encircled it. Maybe they would have just shelled it, or maybe they would have just felt, yeah, just keep them contained. The war is basically over. We'll just leave them there until we sign the peace treaty, sort of thing. So, yeah, that's kind of the meat and bones of what I was looking to do, explaining Berdyansk today and its impact on wider operations, and then just to give you sort of an outline of what my thinking behind the opening plays of the war were, because I know it's quite contentious for some people in the chat. I hope that has kind of illustrated that to a bit. So on that point, let's have a look. Where is, in fact, no, I don't want to dox him. I should be scrolling down there. Where is he? Where are you? There you are. Let's see if he is free now to jump in. And let's see if we can have a bit of a discussion slash interview with the guy in Pridnestrovia. So he's just read that. Yeah. Sam, are you currently in chat? Yes, you are. So Sam, you are now unmuted. If you want to jump in, should be able to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. So just to give an outline to the guys listening, this is Sam. He lives in. I will show you on the map. He
The
lives
map.
in.
Yeah.
Yep. Very interesting country that is many people don't think exists, called Pridnestrovia.
Pridnestrovia, yeah.
Yep. So my pronunciation is getting better, I hope.
Yeah.
And you live specifically in Tiraspol.
In Tiraspol, which is the capital, sure. Yeah.
Yep. So, and also Sam, I just again, Sam, I had the impression was always very angry at me. I always had
Well,
this idea that there was a very
in the
angry
early days,
in
man.
the early days, because I was
Yeah.
talking a lot about Tiraspol and well, not Tiraspol,
Yeah.
Pridnestrovia, because I've learned I do
Yeah.
not call it Transnistria,
You
Pridnestrovia.
you can just call it like the word need, Pridnestrovia. It just means it's by the river Dniester, which is the river that goes through this country. So
Okay,
yeah,
Pridnestrovia. Yeah, yeah. Now that I'm in Pridnestrovia.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Or you could just say PMR if you want. It's
yeah,
easier
I'll
for
probably
us
go
folk.
for PMR to be honest.
Yeah,
So,
it's fine. Yeah.
not a problem. So, just for a bit of context for guys listening, I was talking a lot about, then I was talking about Transnistria because that's generally how I would have referred to this country until Sam has corrected me on it. Uh, just the aspects of how it might impact wider Russian geostrategic thinking in its operations in southern Ukraine and its position and potential influence on the war in Ukraine. And I wasn't too sure specifically on what the Russians had there, what their capabilities were. So whenever I spoke about it, I'd often see Sam very angry at me in chat. So I had this idea that there was a very angry Pridnestrovian, Moldovan, Russian who was very angry at me, but it turns out you're actually American national.
Well, I'm American. Yeah, I was born and raised in America, but I've been living in this part of the world for 20 years. So it's that's a half European, half American at this point.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
guess we'll just do. I don't know if I'm really good
Well,
at interviews,
probably
but
the well, it's okay. The first thing you understand is that on a normal day, if there was no war, Odessa is about an hour. Odessa is the closest big town to here going east, which means that there's a lot of connections from here to there. And obviously, at the beginning, we weren't sure Odessa was going to be attacked or not. And, that's close enough. You could probably hear it. So that's how close we are in terms of physical distance. In terms of geostrategical, the reason why I was so angry is because there's been a long campaign. It didn't start this month or this past month, but a lot of very crazy people, including George Soros, who wrote a front page article in the New York Times in 2014, believe that there's a giant secret Russian military base here, and that gets bandied around a lot. And I think that's probably where the biggest source of confusion is for a lot of people who are outside this area and don't quite understand what's going on. So just I'm going to run through really fast.
Yeah, no problem. You go ahead.
What's here in terms of the Russians. So in 1990, before the Soviet Union broke up, there was a number of conflicts that happened in Moldova. And by 1992, Pridnestrovia was a separate country. It was not recognized for a lot of reasons, mostly because when the Soviet Union ended, everyone just sort of agreed that the 15 republics that were in the Soviet Union were all just free states that had joined the Soviet Union. Now they had, disbanded, and now they were on their own. But if you look in history, 8 or 9 afterwards, based on territorial problems, including Tajikistan had a terrible civil war. Moldova, of course, there was the fighting here, Azerbaijan, etc., Armenia. There's a lot of difficulties that came from that. But in terms of Pridnestrovia, what had happened was that before the Soviet Union ended, there was already an enormous munitions storage facility here. And as the Soviet Union pulled out of East Germany and pulled out of Czech Republic and a few other places, they moved those armaments here. And it's not nuclear weapons. There's nothing nuclear here, but the guy who's in charge of it today or these days said that it's enough that if it all exploded tomorrow, it would be the equivalent of a nuclear bomb going off. It's an enormous ammo dump.
So whereabouts is that? Sorry to interrupt. Is that near
Yeah,
Tiraspol or?
no, it's not near Tiraspol. It's in a city called Kobasna, which translates to sausage in Russian, which is kind of hilarious.
So is that in the north of the country? I'm just
It's
trying to find it on
more
the
in the
map.
north. Yeah, it's close to the border of Ukraine, and it's essentially nothing in there is useful anymore. It's like millions of old bullets and grenades and just crap that's been cooking and decomposing for 30 years. It's mostly just really dangerous in the sense that it could cook off.
It just needs to
It's
be
not real.
disposed of essentially, but
It
it
needs to be
hasn't.
disposed of. It hasn't because of some negotiation problems and blah blah blah. And there's no facilities here to do that. There was a lot. There's a constantly talk about we'll send it here, we'll send it there, but it's very difficult because it's just really old. The summers are hot, the winters are cold. These things are kind of going through a cycle of cooking and freezing, and
Yeah.
God knows, how long. I mean, we're talking millions of guns and bullets, and just it's. I've seen the video of it. It's an enormous facility. So the Russian army has two official roles here in Pridnestrovia. One of the roles is to guard this ammo dump. And again, it's a lot of it just has to do with making sure idiots don't break in there and steal something or throw a grenade in there or whatever. And so that is a Russian army job. The Russian army does this. So when people say the troops are there, they think that it's some kind of invasion force or something. In reality, it's a lot of firefighting equipment and things like that. The other side is that there is a official peacekeeping force, and that is a multinational peacekeeping force that involves Moldovans, Pridnestrovians, Russians, and Ukrainians. Moldovans and Ukrainians do not actually sit around and do the peacekeeping stuff. They mostly have a monitoring role. Unfortunately, Ukraine pulled out of that last week, which means that they're no longer involved, which means they're not watching, which means who knows what kind of provocations that might occur because of that. But the peacekeeping thing is a signed agreement between the Moldova and Russia and Ukraine that has a legal basis, and that right there is not the controversial part. But there's about 300 peacekeepers, armed peacekeepers, who are officially members of the Russian Federation Army who do that. The other ones who are guarding the ammo dump are called OGRF, which stands for Operational Group Russian Forces. That's just the terms that people use here. And that is a larger group. That's more than 1,000 guys. But when keyboard generals on the keyboard and the internet start talking, they always imagine that there's some kind of really active military base here. But one, there's no airfields here at all. There's no helicopters. There's no planes. They have no tanks. There's no navy at all. There's no
So
way to get a navy.
it's not going to be capable of engaging in an offensive
It's
operation
not.
essentially.
it would be with just small arms or a few armored, infantry kind of vehicles. There's a few. We have a parade once a year, and it's a couple armored vehicles and a couple of howitzers, and that's about it.
Okay.
There's no tanks. There's no tanks. There's no planes of any kind. There's no missiles that have been brought in here. Since 2014, Ukraine has not allowed Russian soldiers to enter their territory, which means that they cannot enter Pridnestrovia is between Ukraine and Moldova. That's the two countries that it borders. So if they cannot come through Ukraine and bring in military equipment, they cannot also bring in through Moldova, which means that there's been no new equipment brought here in 8 years. So
Okay.
anything that they had 8 years ago is exactly what they have now. It's kind of really a funny story because the Russian soldiers that serve here fly into Moldova on a normal commercial airliner. And the airport is controlled by the Republic of Moldova, which means if they wanted to stop it tomorrow, they could easily do it. You just put one guy at the airport and say, "You're not coming in, it's the end."
Hmm.
But there's a lot of political talk and blah, blah, blah. So that's why I get a little bit angry because the United States has been running sort of a very well financed disinformation campaign about this country for a long time.
Are you telling me
And
that the
people
United States is unduly influencing and screwing up
unduly
our
influencing,
nation?
because they're like, for example, on February 14th, they announced on their website that all American citizens, which includes me, must immediately leave the country. And few Americans who are here in town, we just all had a beer and laughed. I mean, it's a joke.
Yeah.
It's political theater. So everything is fine here. We do have some rationing, but I think that's mostly to stop the panic buying rather than any kind of shortage of goods. Russian goods are being brought in. There's no sanctions from Moldova. So Ukraine is a friendly country to Moldova. So in reality, we're sitting in a place where we're sort of in between. We're falling through the cracks. We're not pro-Russian. We're not pro-Ukrainian. We're both.
Well, you
We're
don't
both.
exist
So
apparently to most of the world.
yeah, we don't exist. Officially on paper, this country belongs to Moldova. So that includes the Russian government's official position. The Russian government's official position is that Pridnestrovia is part of Moldova, and to resolve the issues that have happened just requires some diplomacy and dialogue. And that in the future, if Moldova, recognizes this country, then boom, fine, they'll recognize it too. But officially, Russia does not recognize this country, and there's no plans to do so. So this whole idea that we're some kind of Russian puppet state that does whatever Russia wants is a bit overly simplistic. There are some strong ties to Russia here, and I'm not going to say that there's no influence, but it's we're not quite as simple as it's made out to be. And again, everybody here has made it very clear, including all the way up to the president, we don't want to get involved in any fighting. We don't want anyone launching any attacks. We don't want anyone doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a peaceful country that everyone wants to be a warlike monstrosity, and that's why it's very frustrating that
Uh,
yeah.
I'm
So
sorry to hear that. I mean, we had a very
yeah.
brief discussion whenever we first spoke, and I
Hmm.
I was always, oh, I really want to get into this discussion, but I'm like, no, let's save it for the stream. It's not just going to be just for me and
Right,
indulging my own
right.
autism. So I guess we'll have that now. But um, so where should I start this? What would be the most prudent thing? I guess let's just deal with the elephant in the room.
Uh-huh.
How is the war affecting the country? How have you
Well,
personally experienced it?
I will tell you, yes, we have. Number one, a lot of people did leave Odessa and came here. We do have quite a lot of refugees here. The country isn't exactly easily to divide, like, oh, you're Russian, you're Ukrainian, but say 60% of the people here are already Ukrainian or Russian. So there's a lot of tense feelings right now because some people are very pro-Russian and want to have a pro-Russia rally. It's I mean, it's kind of strange in some senses
Yeah.
that we haven't had one yet. But on the other hand, there's a lot of Ukrainians who live here before the war, and now these refugees are here, and everyone's hearts are open to the like offend them and that kind of thing. So there's actually been some kind of really strong tensions going on. The refugees, luckily, have not been so many that it has been very expensive. But next door, which is Moldova, it's becoming a problem where the government can't even afford to take care of these refugees. And a lot of the refugees, our refugees will say more or less are the poor people because the ones who are crossed over here, but they said, I'm not staying here. This is kind of a poor country. There's a lot of rich people from Kiev now in Moldova, just down the road, and they are having some problems. They were being robbed. There's been a couple street fights. It's not good, and so that's causing a lot of tension, and it's not something that the government is really capable of handling on a long term basis. So in this area, in that particular,
Sorry,
so
you just
I want to talk
keep
about Odessa.
you keep cutting in and out just slightly.
Oh, oh yeah, sir. I just want to talk about Odessa for a minute because Odessa is a very interesting city in that the people who live in the city of Odessa primarily speak Russian, but there is a gigantic Ukrainian naval academy and base there. So there is a strong, pro-Ukrainian element there too. They divided right now, and a lot of people who live here have family and businesses there, and it's not good at the moment, man.
Okay, okay. So, what about in terms of? I know the Russians they've hit military targets around Odessa. Well, I guess before we get onto
Yeah.
that, I mean, I am aware of the peculiarities of the city. I mean, it's come up a number of times. The horrific
Yeah,
massacre that
it's
happened in the trade union hall in 2014
yeah,
is. Uh,
right. And there's actually a connection there that's a little bit I don't think most people realize, which is that in World War II, a fascist pro-Nazi government was in Romania. Romania conquered Moldova, and then they conquered what they call Transnistria. But their Transnistria was all the way to Odessa and beyond to the you call it the Bug River, but it's actually the Buch River. So in World War II, 1941, the Romanians locked a bunch of people into a building and set it on fire and watched
okay.
them die. And it's almost exactly the same spot where the same thing happened in 2014. So it was kind of a creepy.
So that's why that is especially remembered in Russia.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because it's like it was such a horrible thing to do that it was beyond, a war is terrible and you might shoot someone or whatever, but like locking them in a building and laughing as they burn to death is
And then
particularly
for
kind
that
of
to happen
evil.
in 2014, whenever there
Yeah,
was the
right.
Euromaidan,
And
and yeah.
yeah, yeah, and Vladimir Putin even mentioned this specifically. Like, we need to find these people who are responsible because they've never been arrested or tried for that.
Mm.
And it was beyond, disagreement,
So
beyond.
I can remember watching it at the time, and uh, there was a point where, because I just, again, for people who haven't watched the previous streams, is my history was I did a dissertation on Ukraine because I got very interested in it because of the Euromaidan. I watched it day in and day
Yeah,
out, and I can remember back then there was a couple of days where it looked like Odessa itself might end up breaking away as sort of a quasi
yeah,
independent republic, and then there was clashes in the streets. Then all of a sudden, what was it? It was like 42 people burned to death in the Trade Congress Hall
yeah,
by
and
Ukrainian
yeah,
nationalists, and
but yeah, and including a couple of women. I mean, it was a really vicious thing because once the building was on fire, they wouldn't let the people go, and they just sat there and watched them burn. I mean, it was a really evil thing to do, and
yeah.
it really hurt a lot of people in a way that I think is
And it
different than
looms,
just
from my
you
understanding,
know
is it looms
what
large over the city to this day, especially
yeah,
the
it really
ethnic
does
Russian
because like
part.
it's yeah, I mean, I was in Odessa, not recently, but obviously, but and I remember all the street signs are in Russian, but then like you'll see like one sign, an advertisement in Ukrainian. So there was clearly a schizophrenia going on there. Like the McDonald's would be all the signs were in Russian, but then the store next to it might. It was clearly a divided city. It's a city where I can tell you, you can talk to anyone in the old days. I
Oh,
talk to anyone in Russian, they wouldn't get offended.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
Whereas if you go further, if you go further north, it speaks Ukrainian without even hesitation. So it's sort of like surrounded by Ukrainian speaking areas, but the actual city is heavily Russian. But Odessa is a very strange shape. They call it oblast or a county. It has a long, weird southern part that almost no Ukrainians or Russians live there at all. It's Bulgarians and Moldovans and Macedonians, and it's a mixed up place. And don't forget Saakashvili, if you remember,
Yeah, the
who
Georgian
was
guy.
the
Yeah, he
president of
was the
Georgia,
governor.
and he was he was appointed the governor of Odessa after this trade union thing. So there, you see what I mean? It's a lot of weird things have mixed together in that city. So that's why I'm very curious why it really hasn't been attacked. But you asked me how it's affected us. The other thing that's happened is the Ukrainians, for God knows what reason, blew up the train bridge that connects Odessa to here, which brought in a lot of mostly goods rather than people. And they also closed all the border crossings. They don't want anyone coming here because people here are
Just
yeah.
again, just so you're aware, you are cutting in and out at times, but you are
Yeah,
largely coming
I
through
don't know
okay.
what that is. Yeah, I don't really know what's causing it. Maybe just my phone
Fair
is
enough.
old or something.
But I think it still
But anyway,
seems
yeah, they
reasonable.
cut basically. They've completely sealed the border. It's impossible to leave Ukraine and come here, even
Okay.
if this is another thing that Ukraine has done to make life more difficult for people in Odessa. They will not let them leave. And a lot of people here. I mean, the house I'm sitting in, which is my house, we own it. The people we bought it from, they moved to Odessa last year. I mean, such they're there. Everyone goes there. It's where the beach is. It's where the most beautiful. They have a wonderful opera theater in Odessa that everyone goes to. I mean, it's just it's a great. They have a statue of Darth Vader. I mean, it's a crazy town. A
And I
fun
was I
town. It
was
was also
meant
an
to
international town. There's a lot of
yeah, I was just gonna I was meant to go there once for a wedding and I never able to do it to my great cost and I'll always
yeah. It's
regret
a
never being able to
yeah. It's
live
a
it up.
it's the famous movie where the baby carriage bounces down the steps. That was filmed in Odessa, and you can go see it. I mean, it was a very international city. It was a lot of tourists and just sailors coming into port and fun times and everybody's kind of welcome. And it was national city, very cosmopolitan place, and now it's under siege. It's a terrible thing. So I got to say, just what they've done, just what Ukraine has done to Odessa, is I can't stand.
Yeah, so would it be safe to assume that you would take a more pro-Russian stance in the conflict, or
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna tell you why. It's not that I love war. War is terrible, and I had not invaded Ukraine. I mean, it's obvious that number one, the civil war would have continued, and that had already killed 10,000 civilians. Two, for sure, if Russia had done anything, including just sending peacekeepers to Donetsk, I mean, only that, there would have been the sanctions anyway.
yeah,
So I think they basically calculated we got two choices. We do nothing and we lose everything, including our people, our friends, our allies, or we try to do all the way. Because if we do in the middle, we're still going to get blasted and hated. And everyone's, oh, more sanctions. Oh, more sanctions against you.
yeah,
So I think Putin or whoever basically said, look, we got to do one or the other. We do not on the table and let's go. So I am not such a military tactician as you are. I can't say whether each pincer strike was the right thing to do or whatever. But honestly, I've seen plenty of reports on Russian language media, which is it's thousands of people saying thank you for freeing me. I mean, and the thing you have to remember is that the people that they're liberating, it's the same exact language as the soldiers who are liberating them. It's
yeah,
not the Russian soldiers do not need a translator to talk to the people around them. You know what I mean? It's a very strange war because in no other case can I think of where the soldiers who are attacking speak the same language as the civilians that they're liberating. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
I mean, this has been a point that I've
So is it
oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, go ahead. No,
Oh,
no,
I
I'm
was
just saying, every America and Afghanistan or whatever, like they didn't speak the language. They don't know shit about the culture. They don't know nothing. But a Russian goes to Kherson or Kharkov or whatever. They. It's not just the language. Everything is familiar there. The way the streets are arranged, the way that the stores are, everything is the same. It's almost no difference. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's
I
their
was
bro-
just
it's for them. It's their brothers. And imagine 8 years of your people getting massacred. What are you supposed to do? You tried talking. You tried negotiating. It didn't work.
yeah. I mean, I was just going to make the point that I've made that point. I tried to labor that point quite a lot of times. Is that the Russian soldiers themselves will feel
Yeah,
very out of they won't feel out of place, but it will be a very strange feeling for them to do what they're doing where they are doing it because they would feel at home. The people they would speak to, like I say, they could be babushkas
yeah,
back
yeah,
in Moscow for all intents and purposes. It
yeah.
all looks the same,
Sure,
and
yeah. I mean, and
mm,
30 years ago, it was the same country. So,
yeah.
it's not so different. I mean, and I have Ukrainian friends here who are Ukrainian. I mean, ethnic Ukrainian, speak Ukrainian. It's terrible. They're scared. They're worried about their neighbors. They're worried about their friends. Of course, the average person doesn't want anything to do with this. But look at the way Kiev has revealed itself in the past month. Look at all the terrible things that the government in Ukraine has done. They lie constantly. Oh, the ghost of Kiev. Oh, the Snake Island. Oh, they're attacking the Energodar nuclear plant. No, they're not. Oh, they destroyed the Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial. No, they
Mm.
didn't. Just on and on, the lies and the lies and the lies. And they have repressed a lot of people in Ukraine. I come from the Moldova Romania side of things because I speak that language, but parts of Ukraine were added to Ukraine in World War II for no logical reason that anyone can explain.
Yeah.
And the people who live there, I've been to. It's called the Ukrainian, but in the Romanian it's called Chernouts. It's a city in southern Ukraine. It's right above the border of Romania. And the people there, I was speaking to them in Romanian. I went to,
Is this in the
they
Bukovina
consider
area?
themselves Romanian. In the Bukovina, exactly, yes.
Yes.
And,
Cherniviz.
and that's, it's called Chernivice in Chornovice in Ukrainian, but the Romanians called it Chernouts. That was the old name. And, it was a very big city in prestige town.
Yeah, no,
I
you're
just
you're
took it.
cutting in and out there, I'm afraid.
Ah, shit. Stalin just said it's got that no one can understand. It wasn't any kind of logic that anyone can understand, and no one got to vote on this. You know what I mean?
Uh,
So when the Ukraine ended, sorry, man. When the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union ended in 1991, 1992, several areas of Ukraine held a referendum. Do they want autonomy or not?
yeah.
Okay, Crimea was one of them. And every single one of these groups, including what's called Transcarpathia, which, primarily has a lot of Hungarians there, every single one of them said, we don't really want to be part of Ukraine. And Ukraine said, too bad.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So from their side, you have to remember, they outlawed the speaking of Romanian in schools this year. They outlawed the speaking of Hungarian in schools. It's not just about Russians and Ukrainians. It's about this Nazi Ukrainian idea that everyone has to speak Ukrainian and everyone has to be Ukrainian if you're inside the territory of
The forced Ukrainianization of the of non-Ukrainians
Yeah.
essentially. So I mean,
I mean, it's
I
terrible, man.
yeah, I mean like I can understand why like I have very nuanced on where I stand on the entire thing. I don't support the Russian invasion, but I can understand why Russia feels it has to invade. But I mean ultimately I come back to maybe these internal borders within the different Soviet republics, yeah, they didn't really mean much whenever they were all part of the USSR. But whenever these countries became
Mm.
independent states, maybe there were parts of Ukraine that maybe shouldn't have been part of Ukraine. Maybe there's, that could
Yeah,
be, maybe there's
exactly.
parts of Belarus that
Exactly.
probably shouldn't be part of Belarus, but
There's
I'm,
parts of Belarus that belong to Poland. I mean, everyone's
mm,
got a thing. But yeah, I'm just saying that people in Ukraine, being in the Soviet Union was okay, we're in the Soviet Union. You don't really
We're
get a
all
vote.
Soviets. Yeah.
But when, yeah, we're all Soviets and there's no voting. Yeah, I mean, there's no democracy. But here comes democracy, and the first thing everyone thinks of is, hey, guess what? You get to vote. Do you want to be part of Ukraine? And people said, no, I don't. And Ukraine said, too bad, suck it. And it's a very painful thing that it's not just Ukrainians versus Russians, is that there are huge communities inside. There are 300,000 Armenians who live in Ukraine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a historical part of their territory or something, but there are 300,000.
I even
Or
in my research in 2014, I was quite surprised to find out that apparently there was 25,000 ethnic Koreans lived in Ukraine as well. And then the story behind that was
Ukraine, yes.
yeah, it all goes back to essentially the USSR. As these people used to live. I'm on Google Maps just to kind of illustrate this, but this sort of part
Oh,
of Russia, what is now Russia in the Soviet Union, there's ethnic Koreans used to live sort of around the Vladivostok area, and then after World War II, we all hear about the deportation of the Chechens, of the Crimean Tatars, of people of the Volga
right.
Germans under Stalin. In the Far East, apparently it worked in the opposite way, where ethnic Koreans in Vladivostok area, either they were deported to North Korea or Stalin essentially deported them to Ukraine for some bizarre reason. So apparently there's sort of like this weird legacy Ukrainian Korean community as well. So it is very
It,
very
it,
strange
I,
ethnic
I'm glad you.
hodgepodges.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because if you go to the store here and there's no Koreans here, you can buy a dish that's popular. Again, there's no Koreans here, so these are Russians and Ukrainians eating this. It's called Korean carrot salad, and it
Mm,
has. And I asked the lady a couple, one time. I said, I understand it's Korean, but what makes it Korean? Like she says, it's Korean spices. And I said, well, what's the names of them? She goes, they're just Korean. Don't worry about it. Like.
yeah.
So we're eating Korean. We're eating Korean food here precisely because of that. Even though it's probably not something a person in Korea would recognize, but it's like Chinese food in America is not really Chinese, but
Yeah, like curries in Britain.
yeah. So I'm just saying there are communities, including a group called the Rusin, which is Ruthenians are sometimes known as, who Ukrainians say they are Ukrainian, and they say, and so it's a little confusing, but they are very angry about this situation as well. They wanted. And in Romania, there's a legal distinction between a Ruthenian and a Ukrainian, even though you'd have to do a lot of Wikipedia reading to even understand what it's about. But my point is, not everybody in Ukraine is a Russian or a Ukrainian. There
Yeah.
is a lot of other people there who wanted their participation and to vote and to have their communities and have their schools and their languages and their culture celebrated and protected in a multinational Ukrainian state. And Ukraine said, F you, we're not doing any of that.
So in many
It's
ways,
it's it's inconceivable.
yeah. So in many ways, it's kind of surprising that it took 24 years after the collapse of the USSR for this Ukrainian state to
Yeah,
come
it's
to.
surprising. But let's put it this way: in 2014, if the Nazis hadn't organized into their battalions, it would have the Nazis kept it together, basically.
Alright.
I'm
So
saying when Donetsk said bye bye, it was the Nazis who kept them in. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Otherwise, the Ukrainian army at that point was one corrupt, three conscripts. That's what it was
yeah.
in 2014. There was no training. There was no advanced weapons. There was just a bunch of old crap and bunch of corruption and
And
no
I
will
mean,
to
I
fight, no
it
organization at
showed
all.
back in 2014. Whenever I followed the war back
Yeah,
then, it really showed just how.
yeah, yeah.
Which is why I keep saying that in hindsight I'm betting Moscow and Putin wished they did the invasion back then, because they would have been welcomed in half the country, and the Ukrainian army was a
It's hard to
shadow of
say.
what it
I think
is.
at
And
they were. I think they were a little distracted by Crimea at that point.
yeah,
But yeah. Tactically speaking, you're right. But I'm saying if it hadn't been for Azov and Aidar and these other Nazi
yeah,
battalions, it would have been over. It would have been over.
Yeah, the
They
entire
were
Ukrainian
they
state.
were the army.
Yeah, the entire Ukrainian state, east and south of the Dnieper, would have essentially collapsed.
Yeah. So let's just talk about pronunciation of places in Ukraine. If it starts with a D, the D is silent. So it's the Dnieper River.
Okay.
And yeah, if it has a G, the G is an H. So and you're saying Berdyansk, and then Sever means north. So Severny Donetsk, you were talking about the Severny Donetsk River. It just means the northern Donetsk River.
Okay. I'll have
Yeah.
to remember these. I'm
So like
finally
Gostomel
getting
is more like
the language lesson.
so like you were saying like Gostomel is more like Hostomel, like H. And I'm trying to remember a few other things you were saying. I can't remember. Some of them made me like, like Melitopol, some of them it's just your accent. It's
Alright.
nice though. I like to hear it because, there's real people that live in there. My wife's got a good friend who lives in Mariupol. These are real people suffering here. It's
Yeah.
not just a game of Risk or a video game, which is a lot of people are acting like it is. Not you. Please, I really appreciate your coverage. I really appreciate the time you put into this. And yeah, I know you joke around, but underneath that, there's a seriousness. You've shown a
Yeah.
dedication to it.
I
We
appreciate
wave
that.
a flag and Slava Ukraina, and yay, like just fuck off. On a tactical note, I will just say that the DPR and LNR, or whichever way you want to say it, I'm not quite sure those guys, their army is going to go past their home territory further. I think a lot of I saw a video a couple of weeks ago where they're signing up new recruits and stuff. A lot of these people are not professional soldiers, and I think they basically just area, and that's about all they're going to do.
Yeah.
I think in other words, let's say the fighting is over in Donetsk and Lugansk. I think that they'll just stay there and guard it rather than attack Kiev or something. I don't think that's part of the plan.
Yeah, I guess it
But
has
do
to
you
be
want to talk
way to be
about
seen.
Belarus?
Pardon?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way to say it, but I'm just saying I watched. I was a big fan of their YouTube video before YouTube cut it off right before the war, and let those people have a say, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, you want to talk about Belarus, which is called Belarus, by the way, not
Okay,
Belarus or whatever.
my horrific pronunciation will be corrected by the end of
Well,
this.
it's all right, man. I would just love to hear like a Russian guy saying all the names of the towns in Ireland.
God. I mean, don't worry,
Yeah, it'd be like
everyone. Don't
it'd
worry,
be funny.
chat. I know you like it, chat. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah.
I hate my accent more than you do.
No, it's just these are kind of hard words to say, especially because Russians have another spelling.
Yeah.
It's hard.
So
Especially some of those.
you wanna talk about Belarus to Belarus?
Well,
To a degree?
Belarus, which means it literally means white Russian. That's literally what it means, and it has to do with their ancient Slavic philosophy, which is that all Russians and Ukrainians and Belarus were one people at one point,
Yeah.
800 years ago, in Kiev, and then the Golden Horde, the Mongols invaded. That's Russia today. They say we're the continuation of the original guys. Ukrainians say no, we're the continuation. Blah blah blah. So there's three brothers. One is Ukraine, one is Belarus, one is Russian. So the white part, I don't really know what. But there's I don't know. That's just what they're called. So Belarus just literally means white Russia, and that's just in Russian. It sounds the same. It doesn't sound like a different word, but anyway, that's the origin of that. Lukashenko, I think, is in a difficult place because I do not think that people in Belarus are quite as invested in the story of liberty.
Yeah.
In Russia, the people who are suffering in Donetsk and Lugansk are not Belarusians.
They're Russian,
And
yeah.
even though there might be, yeah, they're Russian, and it was part of the Russian Empire in a way that Minsk and those kind of wasn't. Minsk is Belarus is more involved with the Poland and Lithuania historical issues, And so I think that Lukashenko's in a difficult point because is happy to provide, any kind of support, including, land your troops here, stage your troops here, whatever, medical care for the wounded, no problem. Shoot a few missiles or whatever to defend the border, no problem. But I don't think the people in Belarus are primed for it. I was watching Belarus news a couple days ago, and I didn't really see any talk yeah, we got to, it wasn't any of that kind of stuff. Whereas before this war started in the Russian Duma, the parliament, there was a lot of talk and let's get it. Like Zhirinovsky, the Communist Party was on board, and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Oh, the thing that sort of gets me, why I'm sort of minded that they probably are, is because there's some very interesting deployments of their armies towards the border, and I think Russia is strong arming them to a degree, but then that cancellation of
I
government
do, yeah.
payments as well. So
Yeah,
ultimately the
I agree with what you said. I
Russians.
think
Oh, go on.
Russia's pushing for it, no doubt about it. Russia for sure would love to have Belarus join in. It would also just help on a tactical level because they're
Yeah,
all the way to the north. I mean, they're right above Kiev and Pripyat and Chernobyl. But domestically, Lukashenko's had a rough couple of years, man,
yeah,
and a big part of Belarusian economy is tied into Poland and Germany, and it's not so easy for them right now with their neighbors, like Belarusian trucks, and can having trouble crossing the border and blah blah blah. So I could tell you this much: it's going to be quite unpopular in Belarus if he actually does anything.
yeah. And then the other thing that's kind of got me is and this I think this is probably a mistake of the West just in general, but whenever they unleashed the sanctions on Moscow, is they pretty
Yeah,
much just threw in Minsk as well. Is they hit,
right.
yeah. So if Belarus, if
Belarus, yeah,
Belarus
Belarus.
is already being hit with all the sanctions, granted they were kind of a springboard for the invasion, but they've not actually they're not actually part of the
Right.
invasion diplomatically.
Yeah.
What's really, they've already paid the diplomatic cost. They've already paid the geostrategic sanction
They
cost.
paid some of it. I know actions against their potash exports is really
Mm,
what hurt them a lot. Belarus it's important to understand that the Belarusian economy does not export gas. They actually export electricity to Ukraine. So right now, when someone has in Ukraine, it's Belarus paying for that.
mm.
So they're kind of caught in a weird bind in that again they export a lot of industrial equipment. So
Very,
around
very famous
here
for
you
their
can buy
tractors, I believe.
tractors. Here the main thing you can they buy like bicycle those here. But the big ones are cosmetics, and it's almost impossible to buy a door for your house that isn't made in Belarus around here. They make chemicals, they make paint. They make a lot of industrial stuff that's not really used in your house.
Okay.
Industrial stuff, and all those jobs are what keeps Belarus a stable place. If they don't have any exports anymore, they're screwed. Right now, there is a few sanctions on them, but it's not nearly as comprehensive as Russia's. So I think that's what he's looking at. Like our market will disappear because they do not export to Russia a lot of this stuff. Russia already makes all that stuff themselves,
Yeah.
for the most part. Their market is. I mean, everything goes on a truck to Poland, and from Poland to Germany, and then to the rest of Europe. That's the way it's been for a while, and that's not going to be something
Hey,
that
I've
can
got
be
a.
back from me.
Last week I spoke to Raman, who is an ethnic Belarusian in Minsk, but then I kind of feel bad for this
Hmm.
because you yourself's an American. The next guy I'm looking to speak to who is in Minsk, he himself is an American. So I put out this call to hear voices from the
Yeah,
region,
well,
and it's Americans who live in the region who
well,
I end up speaking to.
well.
Not not not
You
not
have to,
dissuading it or
yeah.
anything,
Well,
but oh, go on, go on.
no, I understand. Look, if you wanted to, I could find 20 people here on the street that could talk to you. But the main problem is that people here don't speak English very well,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and they certainly aren't listening to an English podcast or whatever this is stream.
yeah.
So if you had a Russian podcast, a Russian stream, and they would be happy to jump in and tell you what's going on. But you're doing it from the Western side, so you're going to have to rely on the people who speak English. And a lot of
Yeah, I
people
know.
are it's hard to speak English. They're very shy, even if they speak it. So I'm confident I speak English. I just want to say, just for my own bona fides, is that I've lived here a long time. I'm married to a local person. I own a house here. This is not my backpacking odyssey that I'm just happen to be here.
Yeah.
This is my long term, home here. So just to give you an example, I want to tell you about something local. Is that they started to do the same thing that they were here. They were doing in Donetsk back in early February, which is it says there's a bomb planted in a school or a mall or some kind of place because it just wastes a tremendous amount of time and resources to
Yeah.
screw everything up. Because people are angry because people keep mentioning this place and then they keep saying, "Oh, the Russian army's going to invade Odessa from here," and so people just. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying this is the way the world is right now. That anything related to Russia is on the hate mode.
Yeah. So
So yeah, they screwed us up, man. They've been fucking our economy basically.
okay. So just on
Yeah.
that point, has there been any talk, say hypothetically, if the Russians are able to get a bit of movement and say they eventually
Yeah.
reach the border, has there been any
Yeah.
talk about that scenario, about what would happen then, or
No, but I will tell
no?
you this much right now that again, Moldova, if one Russian soldier from this invasion crosses over the border, there will be an enormous diplomatic row between Moscow and Russia. And although that may not sound like a big deal to people in the West, Moscow and Russia, Moldova and Russia have very good relationships.
Yeah.
90% of the people in Moldova speak Russian as a second language fluently. So, they can talk to the refugees, no problem, blah, blah, blah. Uh, in other words,
Oh, you.
where Russians can come here, no problem. Like it's important, this relationship. So it would, if a single Russian soldier crossed the border under any circumstances, it would be a severe problem diplomatically
Yeah.
with Moldova and Russia.
Because there's been a lot of talk, because apparently Lukashenko, or Lukaminko as I call him, my favorite
Yeah.
Eastern European strongman. But there's been a lot of talk that he did
Yeah.
this is where most of it comes from, is that he did a speech in front of a board
Yeah,
outlining the
you
invasion.
put an arrow or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
seem to be
Well,
assuming that the Russians are just going to arbitrarily invade Moldova just because Putin's
right.
madman and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I don't
You,
believe it myself, but
I got like my own parents sent me that article because they're like, oh God, like people get, they're scared because they don't know what's going to happen in the war. But I think it's important to talk about Lukashenko for a second because Putin, the guy reads a lot of newspapers. He's clearly a person who is disciplined and we'll say a little bit intellectual.
yeah.
Lukashenko, on the other hand, is like a fat, dirty jokes. He's a straight up peasant type character who doesn't read a lot of things and loves like hoo hoo hoo, hey, like he's
I don't know. I
gut
kind of have a
instinct kind of guy.
just on a side note. I kind of have a soft spot for him because he reminds me of like my uncle. If my uncle became the dictator of a former
Yeah,
Soviet
yeah,
republic,
yeah. That's what I'm saying. He's like he's down at the pub. He's drinking a few beers.
yeah,
He's telling jokes. He's not like a chess player. He's not a judo master, and he's a big, strong, physical guy. So he's used to like when he plays hockey against Putin, it's always hilarious because he's so much bigger and stronger, but he's also way less technical and
yeah.
skilled. Where have you ever seen those hockey games where they play every year?
I haven't seen where they
Look at
play
the
against him, but I know that Lukashenko is a
oh
very big fan of
yeah.
hockey.
About once a year, Lukashenko and Putin play a hockey game together, ice hockey.
Oh, wow.
It's yeah,
I can imagine there's an
yeah.
awful lot of political overtones whenever they do that.
Yeah, it's funny to see because one guy's like you said, he's your uncle. He's let's have a beer, and Lukashenko's very into eating and women and this kind of stuff, whereas Putin's kind of like a monk and he's very thin and he's
Mm.
not a material of this world kind of guy, whereas Lukashenko, honestly, if you just give him a straw hat and a tractor, he'd be happy as hell.
He's like the stereotypical Vatnik for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, kind of. Decisions he makes, like if you look back on his, decision back in 2020, which was incredibly difficult to do, and it cost him 900 IMF, was to say no mask, no nothing, no, we're not doing the COVID panic thing, and it was
Yeah.
purely based on. If you look at his speeches, he said, Don't worry about that. Just go outside in the field and put your hand in the dirt, and like it'll heal you." It's very like old timey, like
Yeah.
put a hot pack on your chest and you'll be
Like
fine.
the anecdote that
Old timey.
just hold on a second. Sorry, I've got my phone.
All right.
I apologize for this. Do you just want to carry on if you would, just for a minute? I'm very sorry for this.
Yeah, sure. That's no problem. So yeah. Anyway, about Belarus, I think that Lukashenko throwing a map around with the wrong arrows is pretty typical for him. I don't feel like he's really the kind of guy who's organize some kind of grand scheme of things, but he's in a difficult position. His economy is stable. There's a tremendous amount of international pressure against him for the arrest last year of that next thug, I'll call him Roman Protasevich, who is, in a plane that was on an Irish plane that landed in Minsk. The story from the West is that, Belarus forced. The truth was that an anonymous person emailed a bomb threat. The Irish pilot decided to. Everyone was taken off the plane. They turned out this guy had an arrest warrant. They arrested him. It was literally nothing sneaky or about it. But they used that to put a bunch of sanctions against Belarus, and that hurt quite a lot. And there's this lady flying around named Svetlana Tishkanulskaya, I can't quite remember, who is being treated as the exiled secret rebel leader of Belarus, and she's getting a lot of money and attention. So, they're financing all this crap out of Poland, which Poland basically has turned into America's proxy location to overthrow every government in Eastern Europe. I'm not quite sure why, but let's be honest, we all know Zelensky's in Poland at the moment as well, which is probably why Biden's going there soon. Belarus, you might be right. They might be forced into this war by Russian pressure of some kind. Well, that remains to be seen. It's not always clear because of Russian and Belarusian media exactly what happens behind the scenes. But Lukashenko and Putin have had their moments where they were close, moments when they were not close. Remember, they've both been around in power for 25. 1 minute they're going to be the Union state, which is almost like one state back together, and then another minute, he's in the European Union talks, and Belarus is in a hard spot. I would say that's the easiest way to put that in a nutshell.
So
what actually happens, I don't know, but I will say Putin is probably calling him and saying, "We need you to get involved," and he's probably going, "Yeah, it's better to stay home and drink a beer."
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean,
I'm very sorry for that. It just seems to be every single time that I decide to actually stream, someone decides to call me. Very, very inopportune time. So I apologize profusely for that.
Yeah, that's no problem. My phone has something called Do Not Disturb, and that kind of ends that.
I think I'm just going to get into the habit of just completely turning off my phone, to be honest.
Oh, I wanted to mention the name of the missile that Ukraine keeps firing is called Tochka-U.
Tochka.
Tochka.
Okay. Tochka.
Tochka. So Tochka is a word in Russian and Ukrainian that just means point. Like if you said like my website is Amazon.com, in Russian it would be Amazon.com.
Yeah. Okay.
So why it's called that, I could, so if you like Google Translate, it'll say like point or dot or period or something. I don't really know why that's the name of the missile, but that's Tochka is how you say.
I'm having the language lesson in this whole little discussion we're having. I'm learning to pronounce all kinds of words.
Yeah, your favorite vehicle, which is Bukhanka.
Oh, we're
It's
getting
more
into the discussion now, the
sound.
buchanka. Because you have
Yeah,
driven in a buchanka.
Bukhanka. Yeah. I will say this. I told you this earlier, but I'll say it here on the stream. But if you ever want to come to this town, well, you right, and want probably get someone to let you drive it as well, because they're
Oh,
very common here. People use them.
so go
So
on.
if you ever want one, man, this is the place to come get you one.
You're convincing me to come over. So yeah, I know we've discussed
Yeah,
this
I'm
privately
just saying,
behind the scenes, but
if you
oh, go on.
if you got like $3,000 handy, you can drive one. You buy one and drive it away.
Yeah.
No
Well,
problem.
I know we
They're
discussed
actually
this.
a little hard to find because
Nope.
yeah.
Go on.
No, they're just people like them because they last forever. They're quite reliable vehicles, but there's always someone willing to sell one around here. My friend has an old, not that one, but another old. He's from France, another foreigner.
Yeah.
You know, he bought his dream old Soviet car, and I said after a couple months, I said, "Well, now you had your fun, you know, like how is he?" He goes, "Oh, it's so much, it uses so much gas, it's such a pain in the butt, but I just love it. I can't
Yeah.
stop driving it."
Well, there we go. That's the big reason why I need to go out to Pridnestrovia
Yeah,
to buy a
yeah, pretty
buchanka.
sure. But I'm saying driving it back to England would cost you quite a lot of money. It would cost you more money probably than buying it.
Yeah.
Buying it. Well,
So
that's the thing. You have to understand the gas prices have gone incredibly high in Europe, especially
yeah.
in places where they do not make their own gas. You know, like, and I got to tell you, that's hurting people big time. The prices on the buses have gone up 50. People in Europe are suffering. I will tell you that
Mm,
much. Outside the war zone, they're really suffering. It's not on the news as much as it should be, but people are suffering.
yeah. So just to, I mean, just from your own perspectives, what I mean, to say if Russia wins this war in some capacity or otherwise, what
Which
do you
they
think the
will.
effects of that would be on Pridnestrovia?
Uh, well, the sad part is the government here would probably that they're about to be the next country recognized by Russia in the way that Russia has recognized Donetsk and Luhansk and South Ossetia and Abkhazia. They're desperate to be next on the list. Like we're going
Yeah.
to be recognized, and I'm telling you, that's not going to happen. So they're going to be very sad and depressed because Russia's not going to expend any capital on doing something like that for no reason.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen for Pridnestrovia is that America and its allies are going to go insane if Russia wins. So they will use all of their power to crush any of Russia's friends who are weak, which is Pridnestrovia will be crushed. I
I see.
guarantee they will. And just to let you know, oh, I forgot to mention this. Right before the war happened, there was a really weird thing that happened here in Tiraspol, which is that there is a group called the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, that
Yep.
monitored the ceasefire in Donetsk, but they also have a monitoring. And the Americans, bizarro thing that again didn't get a lot of press because we don't get a lot of press, but they took off all the logos from the vehicles and were using them to spy on Russian troop movements here,
Oh wow.
and they got caught. So that's how desperate they were right before the war started to like cause problems, because that's what America does. America's the devil, and everything America does is turn to shit immediately. So they're going to try to destroy Moldova next. That's what they're going to do. Not through war, but through America was going to do it. Not through war, but through kindness and grants and the National Endowment for Democracy and blue ribbon panels and committees and loans and all this other crap.
So
And
they're going to give
Moldova's
them
going to
globalism. Moldova is going to be the next EU member,
Moldova.
next NATO member.
Oh, that no, they're just going to steal everything before they even become an EU member. I mean, that's not going to happen. I mean, they're not going to ever 60-70% of the exports from here. It's their whole goal is to utterly. There was an election. A guy said there were 12,000 foreign and it's a tiny country, and it's a poor country. It's after so they love poor Moldova. They will do anything because then everyone's desperate for a dollar and say, hey, join our thing, say, be anti-Russian, do whatever. So Moldova is going to be punished mercilessly by the United States if Russia wins this war. Punished in the way that they punish things, which is that we love you and we're bringing democracy. And Biden and his 50 senators will come here on a fact-finding mission and all this kind of crap.
So it's
And
safe
then
to
start
say
arming
that.
people to attack Pridnestrovia.
Well,
There was a war, a fight between Moldova and Pridnestrovia 30 years ago. But since that time, there has not been one single shot fired in anger. It has been completely peaceful. And that's because, partly because Pridnestrovia is a very peaceful place, but partly because Moldovans are really not that aggressive. But I guarantee they will find disaffected, angry Moldovans and start funding them, training them, doing whatever they got to do to attack this place. I know they will. Because
sorry to hear that.
I should mention Pridnestrovia, in terms of outside importance, it has two things that are very important. One, it has one of the largest steel plants in all of Europe. So old metal is somehow, I don't really know how it works, but like a ton of scrap metal comes here and then it's recycled into steel and then exported. And that is a lot of Pridnestrovia's economy.
Okay.
And there's also, it's not very exciting, but they also make a lot of the concrete that's used in Eastern Europe.
Oh wow.
So,
Very, very
so
Soviet then. It produces concrete and steel.
well, yeah, and there's a power plant. So yeah, the hydroelectric power plant. So those are the three things that are the biggest part of the exports here. So they're going to blow those up, do some kind of crap, send in guns. There's a bunch of crazy fascists already in the Romanian parliament. They'd be happy to support that. So the tensions are going to rise. The America is going to fund more conflicts and ethnic divides as they can, and try to put everybody into either you're our friend or you're our enemy. And if you're not our friend, then you are our enemy.
Okay. So Black
So
Lives Matter Tiraspol is going to start up soon then.
yeah, and they did. They had an American Center here with one guy, just one, And I remember it was a couple years ago, I was talking to him. I mean, every year they would rotate him. And I said, you're a son of a bitch. I said, you're a coward. You won't even go on TV because you're afraid to say the wrong thing. I said, look at you. You're just a useless lackey of the government. He's like, well, what can I do? It's good for my resume. It's good for my resume. And I said, oh, yeah, thanks. Thanks, man. And it's a propaganda center States and Hollywood is the best, kids. Everyone go to Hollywood. Unbelievable. And I just said, man, F you. Screw you. I'm
So
sick of you.
it is safe to say that you're not likely to ship up shop back to Seattle or Ohio anytime soon then?
No, 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 no. I've been living here 20 years, man. I wouldn't go back
So
to America
if it's not too
unless
personal
paid
question,
me
how
$10
does
billion.
how does an American end up in Tiraspol of all places?
Well, they're the same way an American ends up in Minsk and everywhere else is that America's a shithole. The country's falling apart. There's a drug addict or a tranny, or the bridges are falling down. I mean, if you look at America objectively, it's a third world country at this point. There's every definition you could think of: falsified elections, riots in the street, burning down. I mean, this George Floyd stuff. They're burning things down all over the place. It doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen in happy, content societies. It happens in places where it's crap. And the joke is just that I don't know. Everyone think like it's a tragedy for me because my grandfather, he fought in World War II, and the America that he believed in is gone. And I don't mean just because women can work that in a conservative way. I'm saying America is gone. It's nothing. It doesn't make anything anymore. 90% of the jobs are bullshit manager jobs
Yeah.
around for no reason. Or Zoom in calls or whatever they're doing. And meanwhile, the bridges are falling down. The hospitals don't work. I worked in a hospital. Every single person was more sick when they left than when they came in the door. We weren't helping anybody. Yeah, I mean, I was just a clerical guy. Don't think I'm a doctor. I'm saying we weren't helping nobody. All we were doing is bilking the insurance company for as much money as we could. That's what we were doing. We were selling bags of blood for $500 a piece. That's what we billed
God.
the insurance company. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's, the whole thing, it's just a sham, a scam. Trump was the greatest president ever because he was saying, "Look, I'm just a TV host, and that's pretty much what America is. A few good TV shows. That's it. There's nothing else." And then the TV shows, even now, are falling down. There's not even any good TV shows anymore. When's the last time you
Mhm.
saw a good American TV show? I'm asking you. When's the last time you saw a great
Um, I mean,
American?
I quite like Better Call Saul. I quite liked Breaking Bad, but yeah, I
All
mean, I
right,
don't
all
own a
right. How many
TV.
years ago? How many years ago was that?
Uh,
Better Call
Better
Saul
Call
was a couple of
Saul
years
is
ago.
ongoing at the moment, but yeah, Breaking Bad was probably the best thing I've
Is it
American show I've
though?
ever
I'm just
watched. But
saying,
that was
if you opened your if you turned on your TV or Netflix or whatever right this minute, it's 90% shit.
yeah,
It's crap. It's not even entertaining anymore.
yeah.
It's not. It's just
I
reimagining the Wonder Years where it's a black girl now and blah blah blah.
yeah,
And
I know.
nothing. It's yeah. It's just.
I
I
don't
mean,
know
it's
about
it's
you, but I'm personally really looking forward to this Netflix adaptation of Lord of the Rings. That's going to be great fun.
yeah. Sure, it's gonna be exactly what
Fact,
everyone
not only
wants.
that,
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to the
yeah,
Netflix
yeah,
edition of The Life of Vladimir Zelensky.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and it can have. No, yeah. No, man. America's last good thing was their TV shows, and now even that is crap. There's nothing good. Nothing's made in America anymore. That iPhone's not I'm using. It's not made in America. The phone, the roads or hospitals are crashing. I mean, it's unbelievably bad. And I did an interview here. You have to understand, Pridnestrovia is not a wealthy country. Moldova is not a wealthy country. Ukraine is not a wealthy country. So a lot of people here have been to the United States for jobs. And they said to me on TV here, that interview, and they said, "Why would you leave America? All our people are going there to make money. You come here, there's no money here." I said, "Well, it's true. The salaries suck, but how many homeless children are sleeping on the streets of Tiraspol? How many?" And I'll tell you the answer is zero. It would be inconceivable to have a homeless child here. If it was on the news, everybody would rush out and say, "Oh my God, we got to help," which is why they're helping these refugees because they kind of treat them like, "Oh my God, we can't have any homeless refugees." Shit, man. There's homeless people everywhere. There's like 500,000 homeless children in America.
Uh,
It's not good. You're
so
not a wealthy country.
would that sort of
You're
be just
shit.
the general sort of Orthodox Christian thing, or could that sort of be like the communitarian culture of being a post-Soviet state,
It's the
or
communitarian culture because but it is because the biggest debate that happened in the Soviet Union in all the states, not just Moldova, Ukraine, everywhere, was are you going to be a continuation of the Soviet Union in the sense, are you going to be a multinational, multicultural place, or are you going to be one language, one nation over others? And that is exactly what divided Kazakhstan. That's exactly what divided Tajikistan. That's exactly what happened in Chechnya. This all of these things. Are you going to be a multicultural place? In some places, such as Latvia, no, we're not. 1/4 of their population has no citizenship papers at all because they're Russians. Oh
yeah,
well, you got no paper. F you. You don't need to travel. You don't need a passport. Blah blah blah. Fortunately, had a nationalist upswing, upsurge in the '90s through a complicated thing I don't want to explain, having to do with Ceausescu fighting with Brezhnev, who used to be the first secretary of Moldova, blah, blah, blah. So nationalists speak Moldovan language and everything must be done the Moldovan way. And here, if you look even at the signs they were holding up, it's not just, research. They were saying, no, this is a multinational, multicultural place. Pridnestrovia has 3 official languages. You can go to school in 5 languages here. Polish, both are allowed to be different and they welcome that. They embrace that. There's actually 54 different ethnic groups who live here. A lot of people don't even know that. But yeah, I mean, some of them are very small communities, but it's not the point. The point is that you are you here, and we're not trying to force you into being Russian or anything else. Whereas these other places, Moldova, Ukraine, Moldova in the '90s, not anymore, but Ukraine modern days and including the 90s, we're saying, no, you must all be Ukrainian. And that's what people don't like. In Russia today, there are 82 official languages, not on the federal level, but I'm saying local level, the elections, your schools, you can vote in 82 different languages. I mean, this is a very big part of what the Russian culture is about. Is that it's not just everyone's Orthodox and
Yeah.
St. George lovers and all this crap. There's an entire group of Russians that are Buddhist. Most people don't even know that.
Yeah, the Kalmaks. Just
Yeah, Kalmaks. Yeah,
as I have it up on my screen, just for people who aren't aware, this, as you can sort of see,
yeah,
Ilistia, this sort of outline on this Google map here, this is
yeah,
Kalmakia, the only Buddhist
yeah.
nation in Europe, well, in continental Europe, and they are the descendants of the Mongols.
Right. So I'm saying, so those people are welcome in Russia. They're not forced to only speak Russian and only, eat Russian food and watch Russian stuff. They have their own culture and it's celebrated. And that's a big important thing for people in Russia. It's the federation. A lot of people think it's just like one dictator sitting in Moscow and he tells everybody
Yeah.
what to do and they just say, yes, sir, yes, sir. It's not even close to being true.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it does say something, the fact that you have Chechens, very, very clearly, very strongly Muslim Chechens wearing the ribbon of St. George fighting for
Yeah.
Russia. How,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
quite how
Right.
did you turn Chechens into fanatical Russian
Yeah.
nationalists? Really does make you think.
Right. Yeah, and during the days of the Soviet Union, every man had to do a service in the army, the conscript stuff. And I've talked to many people who were in conscripts, and they said one of the coolest things is you would meet people from all different cultures. Oh, I
Mm,
met this Kalmykian guys. I met these guys. Well, I met a Muslim Chechen. I met a whatever. So it was very international. The communism. It's communism is for everyone. It's international thing we're going to do. It's every country, every race, every land. And this nationalist fascist crap is just not compatible with that ideology. So here in Pridnestrovia, they've kept that. Like if you're sick, you go to the hospital, it's free.
yeah.
Yeah, you're not going into debt, man.
I not. I
They
mean,
might.
I don't want to get too far off into down the beaten track
Yeah,
of Western and American domestic politics, but it
yeah,
seems
yeah,
to
yeah.
be Eastern communism as an actual Marxist Leninism that came out of the USSR and its cultural impacts on places like
Mhm.
Pridnestrovia and Russia in this sort of cultural
Yeah.
aspect. It seems to be a lot better than what Marxists in the West seem to think it is and what they're pushing on society.
Yeah.
But
I think people in the West just read a lot of books, whereas people here, it's more about your day to day experience, which is that I've been on a bus and there's people around me speaking 3 or 4 different languages and nobody gives a crap. You try doing that in Ukraine, you'll get attacked or
mm,
rough words. I was in Ukraine in 2014. I don't speak Ukrainian. My wife speaks fluent Russian, and my Russian's kind of crappy, but we had to speak Russian because we don't speak Ukrainian, and people were getting on our ass. And I said, "Look, man, I'm not even from here. You need to
yeah,
chill out. Get off my ass. Just because I'm speaking a couple words of your language, chill the fuck out. I'm American. I'm supposed to be on your side. So I'm not even your enemy. So you need to literally step back and calm down." And these guys were ready to get it up. Ready to dust it up with a couple of
yeah.
tourists.
I mean,
I'm like, geez,
just
man.
on that point, I have to say, thank you, Silicon Valley. Thank you to Google. Thank you,
Yeah,
American social media aspects. Thank you for just arbitrarily deciding that every time I try to spell
yeah,
Kiev or these cities in the way I've always spelt them, that I'm actually spelling them wrong.
yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you
I
for that,
know.
guys. That's
Even Odessa, which oh, it has one S
yeah.
somehow.
I'm looking at that right now on the map. Yeah,
Oh,
and
it's ridiculous.
yeah, just a month ago, I could put in like, Kharkov. I mean, I got into the habit because it just got frustrating at the start of me covering this stuff as I just started using
Yeah,
the
hardcore. Yeah.
Ukrainian spelling, and then I was just like, look, I have my views on the war, very very sympathetic to Ukraine and stuff, but can Google, can you please stop telling me that the Russian spelling of this when most of the
Yeah, I
people in
know,
Ukraine
dude.
use this spelling?
What drives me nuts is if you type into Google Translate or any Google products, they always translate Pridnestrovia into Transnistria automatically. Doesn't
Wow.
like thanks a lot, man. Thanks, Google. It's
Uh,
horrible, man. I'm sick of this. And like Nikolaev, the Ukrainians call him Mykolaiv or something.
yeah,
Nobody,
Mykolaiv.
no,
I'm looking at it now.
yeah,
Mykolaiv.
yeah, Mykolaiv. It's like nobody who lives there says that. Nobody,
Yeah,
nobody. It's just. Oh, we had to change it. We had to change it. And Zelensky, they used to. Now they don't. I don't know why, but they seem, until he looks extra Ukrainian.
yeah,
Did you know that? They used to so Zelensky with two Y's on the end.
yeah. And I still use
Just
that
so you,
spelling.
so
Yeah,
oh, okay. Just so you don't think he's a Russian, because it's ski, could be Polish,
yeah.
could be whatever. But two Y's, he's Ukrainian for sure. Sure, buddy.
Well,
And every
again,
Igor is now Ihor, thanks,
yeah,
man.
just thank you, Google, for arbitrarily
Yeah.
deciding the language of an entire
Yeah.
nation to the rest of the world.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying. And then of course all these guys are amplifying all the hate and the
Yeah.
stupidity and the trolling and just, it's okay to anti-Russian on Facebook.
I mean, I can
Thank God.
understand that there needs to be a pushback against Russia for this kind of stuff, but I mean, yeah, I think sort of one of the biggest reasons the Russians are where they are is because they felt that there was a cultural genocide going on of Russian
There
speakers
is
in
a
Russia.
culture genocide.
Well, yeah,
Ain't no felt.
but
It's
well,
10,000 dead kids,
yeah.
10,000 dead civilians, man. How many has got to be? Shit.
Well,
What happened?
go on.
Exactly 23 years ago today, Joe Biden bombed the living crap out of Serbia.
Yeah,
No sanctions against them. No pushback against. How many civilians did they kill there?
yeah,
How many? How many people did they bomb to the open? Zero. How many truckloads of medicine and food did they deliver? None. Nothing. They just bombed the shit out of it because they didn't like it without any
yeah,
authorization from the United Nations at all. No United Nations authorization, no vote in the General Assembly, nothing. There was no legality whatsoever to it. Okay, you have to intervene, blah, 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 blah. Exactly. You could put them on a paper. In one column A is the reasons to invade Serbia. Here's the reasons to invade Ukraine on the right. You could not say a difference in
yeah.
terms of the justifications offered. And yet one of them is, whoa, we're heroes. We're all celebrating. We're the greatest. We're the West. We're democracy. No, it's not true. They bombed hospitals. They bombed hospitals. They were hospitals, by the way, not full of, Nazis who had taken it over. I'm talking. They bombed television stations. They bombed schools. They dropped 23 missiles on a single village in one night.
They
I
bombed
mean,
the Chinese
it's
embassy for
unbelievable.
good measure.
Yeah, yeah. So here's the deal: either America gets punished and NATO gets punished for that, or Russia.
Yeah.
Which is it, man? You can't have two sets of rules,
Well, I mean,
and
the
that's what I'm
point.
trying to tell you.
Oh, go
Go
on.
ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that the point I was getting at is that the Russians, there's a cult. I'm not trying to take a side here, so don't take my wording of this the way it's meant to sound. But the Russian perception is
Mm-hmm.
that there's a cultural genocide going on in Ukraine. Russian speakers are being oppressed and pushed out. So
Yeah,
how does the West respond? How does Google respond? How does Western media respond? Okay, we're just going to arbitrarily
yeah,
change
yeah,
the Russian pronunciation and words of all these names
yeah,
of this
yeah,
entire
yeah.
country. That's
Yeah, we're
totally
taking
not
everything
going
away.
to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
the Russians, think, oh, maybe there is actually something to
No,
this.
no, no, they're
But
not.
I mean, let's be
and I'm
honest. Western
and
governments and especially
and
Western
I'm saying
corporations have
it's
never.
it's not just the Russians who think there's cultural genocide going on there. I'm trying to tell you, it's the Bulgarians, it's
Yeah,
the Rusin, it's the Hungarians, it's the Romanians who live in Ukraine. There's a Polish people who live in Ukraine, a lot of them. And how they're supporting this, I can't even imagine because
yeah,
they're the ones who the Bandera was murdering. Shit,
yeah.
Bandera
So just so
used to go.
chat is aware, this area of Ukraine I'm sort of circling on the screen here. This used to be part of Poland, and during the
Yeah,
Second World War, there was
1940.
there was a
A
genocide of the
Polish
Poles here.
city.
Yeah,
And Lviv is Lvov. I've been there. It's an enormous city. It's more than 1 million people. This was not some village. It was called Lemberg in the old days in World War II. If you read reports, it's usually called Lemberg.
yeah.
I
Because it
don't.
used to be
Yeah,
Austro-Hungarian.
Anne Frank's diary. I was reading it last year. She's like, "Oh, Lemberg, terrible fighting, blah blah blah." It was part of Poland.
Yeah.
And then suddenly magically it's part of Ukraine. Says who? Says Stalin. That's what's so weird. Is the borders of Moldova were drawn by Stalin, the borders of Ukraine were drawn by Stalin, and now everyone's got to defend Stalin's territorial integrity. What? Why are we supporting Stalin? He's been dead 75 years, man. We don't need to hold up his freaking rules anymore, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, without going too far into it, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting how these borders are immutable. Crimea
Yeah, yeah,
must be
yeah,
part of
yeah,
Ukraine. The Donbass must be
yeah,
part
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
Ukraine.
yeah, yeah,
This
yeah,
must be
yeah, yeah.
part of Ukraine. But meanwhile, let's have a look at Serbia. Kosovo, no, Kosovo doesn't need to be part of Serbia, and it will
Yeah,
be
there you
its
go.
non-participation within the Serbian nation will be guaranteed at the
Right,
point of NATO military force. And then if we look at Bosnia
right.
Herzegovina, it doesn't show up in this map, but there is a Serbian sort of pseudo republic within Bosnia
Yeah,
Herzegovina. It cannot
Republika
join.
Srpska.
It cannot be independent. It is not allowed to
Yeah,
rejoin with the wider
yeah,
Serbian nation.
yeah,
It
yeah,
has to
yeah,
stay part of Bosnia Herzegovina, but at the point of NATO military force backed up by the United States. So
yeah,
the point I kept trying to make at the start of the war is you cannot understand what has happened in Ukraine without understanding what the West did, particularly with Kosovo in 2008, but in general, just the way it acted in the collapse of the
yeah.
former Yugoslavia.
Let's put it this way: right this minute, there are more, not just American, but Native Iranian troops. They are under occupation. It might be voluntarily occupied, but it's an occupation. The United States military becomes, synonymous. They are militarily determining the borders of Europe
Hmm.
before this war with Ukraine. They're
And not only
already
that
doing it.
is, I can remember, I
It's
think it
unbelievable.
was after the fall of Slobodan Milosevic, is there was a very real opportunity for Serbia to bring back its monarchy, the old Yugoslav monarchy, but that was basically killed off
Mhm.
because was it Clinton herself? I don't know if it was Clinton herself. I can't remember who said it, but
Yeah.
the American response to the Serbs were, "You're not doing this because America does not do kings." So that was the arrogance of which
Yeah.
the United
Yeah.
States
Yeah.
acted with
Yeah.
itself, as it
Yeah.
arbitrarily decided the
Eh,
constitutional
yeah.
makeup of an
And I
entire
just want
state.
to, I want to mention something because I watched this video today. Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of State of the United States, who essentially s- sanctioned Ukraine and, excuse me, Iraq, and famously was asked in 60 Minutes, like, "Oh, 500,000 Iraqi children died because of your sanctions," and she goes, "It was worth it." This
Yeah.
woman, when she was a child, she's Jewish. So when she was a child, first she was in Prague in the Czech Republic, and then she actually went to Serbia. She was helped 2 times by Serbian families, and then
Mm.
this is how she repays them by dropping bombs on them. So
Yeah.
America's the devil, man. Anybody in the American government, devils.
I mean,
Purely religious section, but they're devils, man.
yeah. I mean, I make no bones about my personal distaste for the actions of the American government. Americans themselves, Americans as people, yeah, very nice people, but yeah, the regime,
Okay,
the
that's
government that they
exactly what's happening.
subsist under is
All
quite.
right. That's how I feel about Ukraine. I know some Ukrainians. I've been to Ukraine. Nice people, good people. There's nothing wrong with them. They're almost the same as here. There's really not much of a difference in terms of, general lifestyle. But their government is insanely corrupt. And it's not just the big guy in Kiev who is dictating this stuff. I've crossed the border several times, and every situation, the people with me are not Russian. We're on a public transportation. They put a gun in your face and they
uh,
start yelling at you and asking you questions. And I said, "Why are you being so hostile? We're just fucking tourists. We're unarmed. We're just to go shopping." Like
yeah.
the fact that I shop. I said, "I got my lunch here." This is, get your gun out of my face. Like, have your parents ever been to Ukraine? I said, why would that matter? So they said, we need to know. So he said, "What's your name of your parents?" And I said, "All right, Brad and Angelina Jolie. That's my
Good
parents."
Slavic names.
And they wrote yeah, they wrote, no, I wrote it, they wrote it down the form, like, "Brad and Angelina, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Yeah, write it down." They're incredibly hostile. The government, we didn't really talk about this, but they're basically robbing the refugees when they leave. The
Yeah.
border police in Ukraine are just milking these refugees. I mean, there are stories of people crossing over. They say they stole, they went through everything in our car and stole everything of value, stealing watches, stealing clothes. It's not just cash. I mean, Ukraine's government is incredibly corrupt. And because it's constantly funded and supported by the United States. That's why. It's never going to get any better when you always doing secret deals with the CIA and secret bio labs and all this other crap. You're never going to have I mean, think about it this way. I listened to the United Nations World Food Program the other day, and they said that Ukraine feeds 400 million people outside its borders. The food grown in Ukraine is exported to 400 million people around the world,
Yeah.
including big parts of the Middle East. And it is the number one source of food that this year they're buying it from Ukraine. That's where they buy it from. That's their number one go-to client to buy food for. And they said, we don't know what to do because the Ukrainians do this. So why is Ukraine so poor? It is a country full of wonderful resources. It is a large country. It is a large workforce that's kind of young that should be producing a lot of value. Why are they so poor? Why?
And the corruption.
They're not some they're not some landlocked, frigid, Iceland kind of country with not much around. No, they have many ports on the Black Sea, wonderful location in between Asia and Europe, and plenty of wonderful farmland that grows some of the best food in the world. They should be a wealthy country. The reason they're not is because these guys have been stealing it and paying off everybody to do it. And so, corrupt officials to steal, and it goes all the way down to the fucking police guy on the border who goes, I'm the last guy you're ever going to see from the Ukrainian government. Now give me the rest of your money and bye. Yeah, they'll feed you across the border. You don't need their money.
Yeah. It's just tragic for the Ukrainian people.
Yeah. So the Ukrainian people deserve better, but they are not ever going to get any better when the United States and everyone else is pumping money, pumping weapons, pumping CIA, pumping all this shit. They're never going to get clear. Now they will. Russia's going to clean them out. There's not going to be too many, British training soldiers or whatever. It's not going to happen anytime soon. They're going to be training, no more training.
Goes, yeah.
Here's how the war is going to go. Russia's going to win. Sooner or later, once green screen Zelensky figures out, then it'll end sooner. But if you think Russia's going to give up, you're nuts.
Yeah, I've maintained from the start that I do believe that Russia will win a military victory. It's just what will that military victory look like? What will Ukraine look like after that? That's the question.
I don't know. The biggest thing that I do not understand about Russia's tactics is that they haven't cut off the internet, and it's really weird. I mean, I'm not saying that they should. Obviously, people depend on the internet, but a lot of this crap that these people are hearing is coming through the internet in Ukraine. This terms are like we're waiting this on the internet, so I'm really not quite sure why they've allowed it to go on, or at least haven't try to counteract in some way with radio or TV broadcasts or something. I don't know. They just really.
There's many things that puzzle me about what the Russians are doing and the motivations behind it or not doing. So maybe we'll find out someday once it's all over.
It's hard to say, man. But yeah, I think we will. But I think a side effect of this is that Putin is getting rid of the oligarchs he don't like, because he just got rid of Anatoly Chubayev. What happened? I think a lot of people thought those Putin's kind of cleaning house, man. I don't know. I've been listening to some of his speeches, and he's getting a little bit more mystical. I think he's getting a little more religious. He's getting a little more. This is a divine, spiritual war here. It's not just the practical stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I think he's really. I mean, think of it this way: GMO foods completely banned in Russia. Why? Why? Why don't they love GMO? Everyone loves GMO, right? So like that, they've been against that for a while. This degradation of culture coming in from the West. That horrible fat guy in Moscow who chained himself to the door of McDonald's. I mean, that is not the future of your country. Kind of. and the Russian Orthodox Church, which again is not all Russians are not Orthodox, there's Buddhists and everything else, but the Russian Orthodox church has been celebrating because they're like all of this, the porn, the child stuff, the Disney stuff is bad. It's for your soul. It's bad for your culture. It's bad for your future of your people. And I think there's a war on that level going on as well. It may not have been planned or intentional, but I think there really is a war. Like, what is the culture? Is it to be completely Europeanized? To be just,
Well, I mean,
another.
if your kids aren't raised by transgender drag queens in kindergarten, then are
Right,
you a
right.
civilized
Yeah,
country?
yeah. Yeah. So is that the future? Do you want this? You don't want these transgender swimming competitions and you teachers teaching sex ed and all this kind of stuff? Do you
Yeah.
want that?
I mean, the
And
thing
Russia's kind of
that
saying, no, we don't.
I'm just
We don't want.
conscious that I do have to start wrapping this up in a bit, but I mean, just on this point, I'm sure
Yeah, yeah, sure. No.
you'd have a better insight of this, but I love this idea that's going around in Western Instagram as well, the official Ukraine Instagram account. And then there's other websites that have done the same, and they're praising Ukraine for its tolerance of the gay community, of LGBT
Right,
rights. As Ukraine is
right.
taking the stand, Ukraine is becoming more tolerant and more liberal in the face of
No,
war,
it's not. No, it's
and
not.
how Ukrainian homosexuals are taking up arms to defend them and their
Oh
freedoms
God.
and liberties, because Putin is personally going to come in I don't know, I can't say the word
Right.
if I'm going to put this up on YouTube, but he's going to gay
Yeah.
bash them personally because Ukraine is a
No.
because Ukraine loves gays apparently. I mean, all the Ukrainians
No, they
I've
don't
met.
though. That's what I'm trying to say. They don't though. They
Yeah,
don't.
I know.
I mean,
I know. Of all the
look,
Ukrainians
look.
I've personally met, I mean, they're
Kiev, Eastern European city. I mean, the restaurants in Kiev, they have every possible thing you could ever want in terms of a European city. That like, oh, fancy cafe and this and that, blah blah blah. And some of that is perfectly understandable stuff. And the thing is, it really goes against the average
yeah.
Ukrainian person's
Well, I mean,
morals and
capital cities
standards.
are by
And
their
I'm
definition in
not,
this age
and I'm not,
degenerates and
yeah, yeah, and I'm not talking about, look, some people are gay. It's natural. I'm not trying to be anti-homosexual or something, but this glorification of these things, the breaking to people in this part of the world,
yeah.
and just because you have a big parade in a corporate sponsor doesn't really mean that you have the deep support of the average Ukrainian person, because I don't think they do. And so the average Ukrainian person is kind of saying, "What is happening to my country? Like this is not
Yeah.
my country either."
Well,
You
I
know what I
mean,
mean?
on the Instagram post is I is I looked down it and I looked at it and I was just like, the Ukrainians I've met, we would have a very different interpretation of this. And whenever I look down on it, is everyone who was praising it were English, and they were by
Mhm.
and large they were Americans, and
Yeah, yeah,
unsurprisingly, quite a
yeah,
lot of
yeah. Right,
Californians.
right,
But then whenever I looked at Cyrillic, who were typing in Cyrillic, and I started
right,
translating the Cyrillic,
right,
I was just like, okay,
right.
this guy, he says he lives in Zotomir. Yeah, I he's not going to be on Instagram much longer once this comment comes to their opinion. And it was just like all these Ukrainians who are just like, uh, you didn't speak to
Yeah,
us about this post before you put it up. I mean, like, yeah, we don't like Russians, but I mean,
yeah,
we are not what you think we are.
right.
It's just,
The
yeah,
one thing I would say that probably encapsulates the average Ukrainian culture best, in my opinion, because I was there a few years ago, and through the country I was there, ordinary people, is this the average person who is married over there has a wedding ring that is not made out of gold and almost sometimes not made out of silver. It's
yeah,
usually either a simple steel one or a bronze one, and yet there's no shame in that. You're married is for love. You don't need this fancy diamond ring and a big gold thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's enough that you love someone and you have a ring to show it. You don't need to be engaged in this material race to the top where everybody's doing this. But
yeah.
I'm just going to conclude by one thing. I was news on TV. The TV has commercials. They run advertisements in between their news broadcasts, And I was watching the first week of the attack, the invasion, and it was commercials for the new iPhone, buy it,
Oh
like
God, yeah.
luxury type thing.
There was one
And
a CNN report it from
yeah.
Kiev, and literally in the background there was
Hmm.
Russian missiles coming in and hitting targets, and then as the air raid was going off, the air siren was going off, the Russian missiles started hitting. Is the CNN just immediately cuts to an Applebee commercial, and it's just like wow,
Yeah.
wow,
So Russia was kind of Russian state TV was, showing the same crap that you could see in any country, any Western country. So, they're losing their identity in a sense. They were losing their vision. And some people want that Western vision. I know that. They want to drink from Starbucks and they want the new iPhone and they want to Instagram and all this crap. I mean, I know that. But there's a deeper, older part of
yeah. There's something more than
Ukrainian
yeah,
that that's tied to these old values.
yeah. I
This
mean,
really Bible thumping, Christian and whatever. But I'm not. But I mean, it's this is who they are, and this is not who they are, and pushing them into this rainbow flag crap too fast and too soon is, and it wasn't working. It is
yeah.
a lot of people I think now who don't live in Moscow and don't live in St. Petersburg and don't live in Kiev are celebrating because they're like, good. I'm tired of these freaky parasites who get fat and sick and look terrible and their marriages fail and they produce nothing and they sit in an office and click on buttons and somehow they're good and I'm nothing because I just live in the village and grow
Yeah.
potatoes. Uh-uh. Mm.
Well, either
Long
ways.
term, 20
Oh,
years, we'll see, man, because I think Russia's gonna be ahead. That's my guess.
yeah.
I'd rather be
Well,
here than in America, that's for sure.
maybe hopefully the worm has turned in many ways. But either way,
I hope so too, man. But it was good. Thanks for your stream, man.
yeah, no problem. I'd love to go on more, but like I say, unfortunately, I am going to have to respond to
No,
this
man. You're gonna have
really
to.
irritating
I
phone
will
call at an
just. I
awkward
will.
time. But
Uh, oh, it's all right. I just want to conclude on a personal note, saying, please eat some fruit, man. Quit
I
eating that
do.
junk.
Don't worry, I do.
You're kind of you're kind of like an Olympic athlete at this point. You're doing a marathon. This is not just a 1-2 day, all night
Yeah,
streaming.
I
It's
know.
like eat
I
some fruit,
mean,
man.
I
That's it.
whenever I post the really bad, I mean, I'm actually barely
Oh,
eating to be honest. But whenever I do post the really bad stuff, it's mostly just to agitate a certain section of chat. I do actually eat vegetables
well,
and fruit, believe it or not. But yeah,
do
but
you eat fruit? Like, what's the what? Eat some oranges or something, man. Something light,
yeah,
not cooked
yeah.
food. I don't know what weirdo British Irish people eat. They just boil everything, right? Just put it in the pot and or no thanks.
You know, maybe whenever I go to Tiraspol to pick up my buhanka, we can
Yeah.
have some borscht and pelmeni.
Yeah, or Ukrainian food. We have that too. So yes, it's very
But
popular Ukrainian restaurant here.
thank you very much, Sam.
So
I do
yeah,
appreciate it. Like I say, whenever I kneel down
sure.
Felix and what Felix wants to do, I'll try and get you on with him so you have a bit more of an audience to get the word out.
Sure.
But do you
Oh
have any social media you'd like to put out for people to follow, or
no, I really don't. I really
okay?
don't. I mean, I'm on Telegram with my real name, so any crazy people want to dox me, good luck. Have fun.
Yeah, just be aware of saying that because I said that as well, and there is one fucking psychopath who is out there trying to do that.
Yeah, I know.
But
I'm just saying, I live in a city that you cannot get to. So good luck, man. Here's my challenge to anybody who wants to fuck my life. Find the phone number to the police department here in Tiraspol, and just good luck trying to call it, okay? Because you won't be able. It it only works for phones that are back. So good luck calling the police to my house, and good luck with everything else.
So
All
no
right,
swatting
fuck
in
you
Tiraspol
stalkers,
then.
man. Yeah, I mean, there is a way to do it, but no one who speaks English can do it. So good luck. Let's put it this way: I had to go to the police station and ask them how do I call you guys because I couldn't figure it out myself. So that's
Wow. Many ways it sounds idyllic where you live.
Yeah.
But no,
It's fair. Yes, it does. No fighting here, and Ukrainians and Russians get along and always have and always will, and that's what I like about this place. And not just those two, but let's try to get along. Whoever it is that you don't like, try to get along with them. Whoever it is,
Fair enough.
There's
oh, go on.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, no more hateful rhetoric. Just speak your mind, but let's just keep the trolling down, people.
You hear that,
this
chat?
isn't YouTube.
I love you, chat, but
Yeah,
Christ.
yeah. Calm down, man. Everything's a conspiracy. Yeah, well, not everything, Shit.
But yeah,
All right.
thank you.
It was good talking to you, man.
Yeah,
Please
thank
take
you
care
very much, Sam.
of your health and your
Yeah, no problem.
And
Thank you
I
very
will
much,
talk to you
Sam.
later.
I do appreciate it. So I'm going to jump into the question.